Hello? Yep, hot mic. Hot mic. Hot mic. Hey, everybody. All right, we're getting started here. Oh, this is fun. Uh, all right, welcome everyone. Hey, I can see some chatting. Good times. Yeah, I've never done this before. I guess so. Yeah, good times. Oh no, I don't know what that was. Some kind of notification. You're gonna hear all those, I guess, because well, maybe I should turn that. I can turn that off, I think. Let me just, yeah, maybe now you won't hear them anymore. Sweet. There's gonna definitely be a lot of like technical, like, oh, we're figuring this shit out tonight because we've never done this before. So definitely when we're switching to presenters and stuff, that's gonna be an exciting time for everyone, and you'll get to see a little bit of like how the pudding's made. Is that the? That's not a right metaphor. Okay. Uh, so we are IGDA Twin Cities. Here's our little intro-y slides. Oh, but I'm covering them up. Terrible. I don't know if this is going to help or not. Yeah, I mean, all this slide tells you is today's date, so that's really useful. There is like a 6-second delay, I think, in the stream. Oh man, I can't like read all this stuff as it goes by. Somebody tell me if it's cool. Oh, hi Gabe. Yeah, okay, cool. Yep, raise your hand if you've never been to a Twitch stream before. Who hasn't been to an IGDA meeting? That's actually a much better question. Scott, put your hand down. Oh, Scott's never been to a Twitch stream before. That's probably more realistic. I would believe that. So anyway, yeah, we always have some new people, and I'll bet there's at least somebody who's never been to a meeting. Yeah, exactly. How do you raise your hand? No, you can like do a thumbs up emoji. I don't even know if they have those because they don't have the standard emojis. It's terrible. Awesome. Great to have you, Furious Fur. I'm sure that's your real name. Okay, I'm going to move on. These are our standard intro slides, aside from that schedule that was up for forever. Welcoming new everyone. Our meetings are open to everyone, so you don't have to be an IGDA member, obviously, to be here. Certainly not online. We aim to be inclusive and a safe space, so we do have a safe arcade policy. Obviously, that applies to the Twitch channel, although I'm sure Twitch has their own policies. Usually, we would also thank the Nerdery here for buying us pizza. Sadly, there is no virtual pizza. Actually, there probably is virtual pizza. Like, somebody put some pizza emojis in there. I'm sure that's a thing we can do. Raise orcs. How do you raise an orc? I guess, like, you bring it up from childhood? Okay, that was a sad joke. Yeah, pizzas! Okay, so these are generally the people that make this thing happen. I basically just find speakers and do this little intro thing every month. It doesn't usually involve DJing, although that was super fun, and I'm definitely going to make that happen every month. I have a huge folder full of video game soundtracks, so I cannot wait to pull some more tracks out of there. Although I might have to always play a Zombies song because that soundtrack is so good. I have a bunch of his other soundtracks too, and they're also really good. He's been doing like a bunch of indie video game music for like 10 years or something. That dude's super talented. Okay, so thank all these people. I would normally say they are the people you should talk to after the show, but I mean, I don't think you can really do that. I mean, I guess you can chat with them the whole time, so enjoy. Dorito chips. Oh, those aren't pizzas? What? All right. Pathetic. No pizza emojis. Aren't there? There are real pizza emojis, though. Oh, yeah. Sweet. Okay, what am I talking about? Okay, this is going to be so distracting. All right, here's our calendar. Oh, I'm covering up April. Yeah, there's April. Okay, we don't need April. Although I guess like April is kind of important because you know, the VR meeting. So this is where I'm going to talk about the so normally we have 2 meetings a month. The second Wednesday of the month is this meeting that you're at right now, and then oh hey, I see some pizzas. It's not impossible, not impeachable. Okay, now I'm just that was a reach. Next month, hopefully, we will have UW Stout senior projects showing off. We'll see how that works because there are like 8 of them. Yeah, that was terrible. I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't know how that's going to work or whether we're going to even do it because it will be difficult to coordinate. So we might try and have them like record ahead and then like maybe answer Q&A or something on the stream. We might just save it for like the spring, or not the spring, the fall, I guess it would be. We'll see if it happens. I don't know. So it is a little bit up in the air. We think that, I mean, that's what we had scheduled for next month. We'll see what happens. We are having a VR meeting this month. I don't know why it says next month. Actually, it should probably always say this month or later this month. I think I maybe even added that next month, and that was obviously a terrible mistake. But so Ian is going to be presenting his game, Cosmotic Blast, which is sort of like a sequel to Cosmotic Mission. Super interesting. It's available on VR headsets, I think just on the Oculus store right now. So you can check that out before the meeting if you want. And Zach wanted me to show this fun slide or image from last month's meeting where we all met up in Altspace. So this was like literally all of us standing on the virtual stage. There was kind of a virtual auditorium that we were all standing in. You can see me here. I'm the like 4th from the left. I'm bald. I guess like there are a few baldies. There's like 3 or 4 yeah, of us standing in there. Pretty cool. It was actually really fun. I didn't expect it to be as fun as it was to be in there. And we did also stream that, but I hadn't checked the box at the time to record the stream, so in theory this will be available to watch after, but that one was not, sadly. It's like lost to the ether. So if you weren't there, it was one of a once in a lifetime event. So we're gonna do it again this month, and it will be less once in a lifetime because hopefully we'll record it. So there are a bunch of ways that you can become involved, or at least you know, interact with some of us online mostly. These are a bevy of them. The IGDATC.org is kind of the main hub for all that. There's a Connect with Us link in the navigation, and that has a bunch of stuff on it, our Twitter and Facebook. But probably the most important is the MSP Gamedev Slack. So if you don't already know about it and you're not already in there, it's a Slack team that's open to the public, and we have actually, due to Glitch locally, like a little nonprofit. We have like a free nonprofit account, so it's actually got history, and there's just a lot of communication that goes on in there. It's really cool. So I highly recommend, if you're not already in the MSP Gamedev Slack, to join that. We are always looking for presenters. Oh look, I can make this like myself. I guess that's not. I don't fit there. Oh well. Anyway, we want you. I think Ryan made this image. Actually, is that true? Ryan probably found that image somewhere. That's my guess. I don't know. Anyway, we're always looking for presenters, and if you don't have a VR headset or you don't even want to be in VR, you can always run in 2D for the VR meeting. So, yeah, thanks. And Zach Octoplow is our host for the VR meeting, and that's his real name, Octoplow. So yeah, if you want to be a speaker, or you just know someone and you want them to be a speaker, definitely let us know. You're always welcome to just message me, or you both found and made that image, Ryan. Thanks to Ryan. I should put a little image credit on this slide. Thanks, Ryan, for this awesome slide. We are a child organization, or like a chapter, rather, I guess is the technical term. Is that a technical term? I don't know if that really is a technical term. Of the IGDA, which is a truly international organization. And if you can become a member, a card-carrying member of the IGDA. I don't know if they send you a card anymore, but they used to. And it has some benefits. You can find them on igda.org. And they are like a lobby, so they'll lobby Congress on behalf of video games, mostly big video game publishers, but I guess it all trickles down. Ooh, no, who knows? Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Anyway, if you do become an IGDA member, you should tell them that we are your chapter. In theory, there's some benefit to that, so thanks, and thank you for becoming a member. I thought I'd add this slide, but my face is covering it up. We are obviously experimenting in these unprecedented times with how to do this remotely. So here I am in my living room. I wish I could show you all these shelves, because I recently converted them to hold just board games. There's just this like giant wall of board games behind me that you can't see very well, but it's super cool. And I never get to play them anymore because virus. But anyway, we're on Twitch, at least for the foreseeable future, and we're kind of figuring it out. But we're definitely interested in your thoughts and opinions and feedback, and how we can maybe do this better. Certainly, we could do a lot more on Twitch. I mean, like, we could do anything. So one of the things we're kind of like thinking about or experimenting with the idea of doing, certainly, is to do some playtesting. So basically, I think I want to kind of open it up to anybody in our community. We'd love to like host you playtesting like local or community games on the channel. We're scheduling the first one for next Wednesday at 3 p.m. and we'll be playing a couple of the UW Stout Senior Project games, and sort of in prep for next meeting, assuming that actually happens. And we'll do that again with some of the other Stout games, hopefully. But if you have games that you want to get play tested, or you'd like to see streamed on our channel, please let us know. Or if you'd like to do some play testing and stream, let us know that too. Although I think there's going to be more need or want to do that. Although, who knows? We'll see. Anyway, if you want to be involved, please let us know. Definitely one of the places you can give us feedback is in Slack. And we're obviously thinking about other things. I mean, there's just so many things we could do virtually. Let us know what you like, what you want to see. we would be happy to consider all possibilities. I'm just gonna glance at this, like make sure I'm not missing anything in the feed here. Oh yeah, tabletop simulator. You know, that's a great idea, and that's gonna lead nicely into. We have just a couple of plugs. First of all, Ice Cold Games, icecold.games. If you don't already know about it, that's a website for sort of local game events, community, businesses. It's kind of a directory. So Zach hosts that, but anyone is free to add stuff to it. Not that we do frequently enough. Let's see. I don't know who you're talking to, Eric, but what does that have to do with anything? All right. So, and then the only plug actually that I have, it just launched yesterday, and I see Adam in the chat, so this is probably a surprise to him because I didn't even tell him I was going to do this, but his new Kickstarter is launched for Planet Unknown, which I've been demoing with Adam because he's publishing one of my games a bunch of times this last year, and I've demoed this game like probably 40 times or something, and like people love it. This is going to do so well in Kickstarter. It's already funded, like day 2 or day 1, I think it was funded. So it's a super awesome game. And oh yeah, there's like a digital version coming. That's super awesome. Yeah, so it's fun. It's fun polyomino game, and it's on Kickstarter right now. I'm already a backer. Sweet. So you know I can fit it into this shelf behind me someday. Aww. Okay, and that's really all I have for like the plugs. I kind of said we weren't going to do it. We didn't have our stuff together in time to send out an Eventbrite notice with any sort of. I mean, we just didn't do it this month. So, like, if you got an announcement, it was today for this, and so yeah, I just didn't think we had time to do plug my things. Or like I didn't really know how it would work. So if you have ideas about how it's going to work, definitely that's another thing we want to sort of talk through or like figure out. I think probably the easiest is just to do, send us your links just like normal, and then unfortunately, like I just don't think we're gonna chat with you about them. You can just like answer questions about them in this channel. That seems to be easiest, or that seems like it might be the easiest to me, but I don't know. So this whole looking for group thing, we don't really, I don't know how you're going to do that, but you are obviously welcome to plug yourself in chat. Yes, absolutely, plug yourself in chat, please. Everyone, feel free to just chat away while I'm just babbling, because that's what I'm doing. Although I'm almost done, so it's great. Ooh, I shouldn't. Oh, every time I move my cursor, it's like a little cover up there. It's okay, that's just the URL for the slides. The slides are all available online pretty much all the time, so just for the record. Oh yeah, Savranti is, yeah, wait, so is it actually, oh, closed beta, okay, cool. Yeah, I've been playing a ton on Board Game Arena lately, which now I'm like talking about your competitor, but it's awesome, and like I'm looking forward to your service too, and digital board games, it's like all the time right now. I mean, that's all we got. All right, cool. So this month, our member, I keep meaning to change this to like short project, although I don't know if that's the right word either. Anyway, we have usually 2 presentations a month, and our first presentation this month is going to be, and actually like we might mix that up too. So like while this whole shelter-in-place thing is happening, we might just go down to like 1 presentation a month. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But so anyway, Dev Jana is our first presentation. I want to make sure he's ready. I'm assuming he's watching the stream. Yeah, so he's calling me now. Let's see how this goes. Awesome. So this is the technical, like, you're just watching the fun. You're watching the pie getting made. That's, I don't even know. Pie? Is it pie? Like, what do we make? Okay, I'm gonna put Dev on.
Are you? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, can
Holy crap. Hey, everybody. Well, I'm watching the stream over there and existing in real life here. So there's a time bubble vortex just between these 4 inches between screens. Hey, everybody. It's good to kind of see you all or to see your names and your chat stuff moving along. My name is Dev. Hey, this actually feels really good. It's kind of bizarre how how much I feel right now like I needed this. So this is going to be designing an indie DLC for the International Game Developers Association of the Twin Cities, April 2020. I go by Dork Chocolate sometimes. Sometimes I go by Tiny Enormous. I'm the president of Code and Noises at DevNAri. I'm a director of full stack construction at Prime Digital Academy, and I'm an adjunct professor of game design at Augsburg University. I'm also kind of something at Puzzle Fox, but we will see what happens there. So Newt One is a nonviolent 3D musical platformer that Ari and I made. If you've been around here, you've probably seen it quite a bit. It's available on all the platforms, mainly because of our relationship with our publisher. A little bit more on that later. Because what we wanted to do as indie devs was really focus on being our goofy, dorky, happy selves and put that into the game. Right now, it is available on everything, and we've released one DLC so far, but we're going to release another one. The development of Newt One was really kind of odd. It started out when Ari was still up here, and I was still living in LA. So that picture on the left is actually a screen cap from one of our very first calls in Skype when we were designing the game. And like one of the weird things about this is you can see, hopefully you can see my cursor here. The art isn't even done. These were the first mood boards when we were talking about like what would the game world look like, how would it feel, and Ari really kind of nailed the feel and like the color palettes. He has this sense of like really bright color palettes that came through. And then we started doing the usual indie dev thing. We started showing it at conferences and cons and stuff like that. Up here, Ari is he's very vociferously advocating. He's kind of like he's got a little chipmunk stance happening, but I think he was in the middle of going like this while he was explaining what the game was to some people. I believe this was at Mindfair a couple years ago. This was our booth at PAX West recently. And then it kind of morphed into, because we had done that so much, which is one of the first things I will encourage anyone who's making games to do, is not to try to do the grand reveal of like, okay, the game is done. Now everybody look at it, but get it out there in front of people as quickly as you can. But because we had done that so much, it very quickly, maybe not very quickly, over the course of maybe a year or two, kind of turned into this thing where it was just like a way for us to like just do weird stuff. So like we made a non-violent musical platformer that's really, it's not necessarily for kids, but it's super kid friendly. So we figured, why not do a video review of Rambo Last Blood at the Mall of America by the Lego place? Or this was from me packing to leave PAX West. I pack my clothes in a funky way, and it always helps me like travel really light. So I was like, okay. Sorry, I'm adjusting my AirPods. I'm not picking my ear, just so you know. As we were leaving PAX West, so it became this way for us to kind of express ourselves in ways more than just what's in the game. And when I think about indie companies that I believe are doing it right, Supergiant kind of bubbles up towards the top. If you haven't watched the brand new no clip video about Supergiant and the making of Pyre, which is probably my favorite game of theirs, I highly suggest it. But they seem like they are a company that is doing everything right on the creative side, on the technical side. And I also kind of feel like I know Jen and Logan and Amir just simply from the amount of time I spent with their games and the way that I interact with them. So that is something that became part of how we started both connecting with our publisher and also dealing with how we're going to develop our games. So Whitethorn Games is our publisher, and I wanted to put this in here because, well, for a couple of reasons. They make a lot of this possible for us, but also the way that we got in contact with them is really kind of bizarre. So Whitethorn, in the bottom right is a picture of my hometown, Erie, Pennsylvania. It's about 300,000 people on the northern coast of Pennsylvania. See, Rachel just put an emoji in there. You're about to be mentioned. You're about to be called out. So they're in my hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania. They're actually the company is from where I'm from, which I thought was really, really interesting. And the way that I got in contact with them was completely out of the norm. And it really epitomizes how personal relationships and interpersonal relationships can become rewarding business things, business relationships, which is really kind of at the core of being indie. So a couple of years ago, I played a game called Bombfest at Glitch's Playtest. Maybe not a couple, probably a little over a year and a half ago. Rachel was demoing it there and taking feedback. And then maybe 5 months after that, a friend sent me who still lives in Erie, sent me a newspaper article that said Erie company publishes a video game from Ohio. And it was the game Bombfest that I had played. So I was like, wait, what? Stuff like that is happening in my hometown. So I called Rachel and was like, hey, how did you get in touch with these folks? How did you even find out about them? And she was like, well, they're in Ohio and blah, blah, blah. And I just called them, and wasn't even pitching the game. I was like, how can I help cool tech stuff happen in my hometown? And very quickly, the discussion just kind of became, actually, I was flying to my hometown and I was going to meet with them. And then they were just like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll stop by when you're here. We'll do coffee, see what happens. And we got snowed in. I don't know if you remember last March, we got like 24 inches in 2 hours in one day. And that was the day I was supposed to leave. So like, yeah, just give us a call. And I Skyped with them. And they were just like, yeah, well, I'm not sure how you can help. Do you know anybody who's making like a non-colorful video game? And I was like, yeah, it's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm like, well, how much longer do you need on it? And I was like, it's actually pretty much done. We were just working on the translation, so our game is playable in 7 languages. So that was how we got connected. It was really kind of through this community for which we are streaming right now, and also my home community. And it was really rewarding for a couple of reasons. This is their booth at PAX East, so you can see Newt One is on the screen. They're doing a great job of being advocating for us, but they also are key to us being able to release things like DLC onto multiple platforms at the same time. It alleviates a lot of the stress for me as the sole developer, programmer, I should say, to make the translations that need to happen for it to work on all platforms. You should check out their games. If you did games that feel kind of like Newt, you'd probably love them. Starcrossed is one of their games, and I actually was showing Newt in a booth right next to Starcrossed in St. Louis a couple years ago. And then the first time I walked into their office, I walked in and they were video chatting with Francesca from the Starcrossed team. So it was like, oh, like it kind of felt like home already. That's my cat in the corner, Commander Wisdom. She's actually sleeping on the bed behind me, but she's a Calico, and you should check out the game Calico that Kels is making. It's really cool too. So that's how we got hooked up with our publisher, which allows us to kind of, now she's right here. She knew I was talking about her. But now that we had an avenue to be able to expedite our ability to do releases, and I'm going to talk about the release workflow a little bit. We tried out our first DLC in October. The first DLC really comes down to this top left sketch Ari did. It was probably like this big on a piece of paper or something a long time. That was a drawing he did almost 4 years ago in 2016. It was a drawing of the 2 main characters in our game as in Day of the Dead, or like done out for Day of the Dead. And then a couple years later, we did our first DLC, which was like a patch for some controls, some things that people had asked for, and a couple bug fixes. But also from October 31st through November 1st, Newt is wearing a Day of the Dead outfit just for those days if the system believes that it's those days. And so Ari always does some really amazing art for the releases. But because we have kind of bought into us being this kind of we are who we are all the time indie devs. When we went to PAX West, I don't know if you've ever been to Experience Music Project or what's called MOPOP, and that was what's called the Museum of Popular Culture. They have these jam rooms where you can play something, and then they used to give you a CD, but now they email you a link to the MP3. So we just went into one of those rooms, and I played some drums, and Ari's an accomplished pianist as well. So like we just kind of like played a silly tune, and then we used that as the video where we announced that this DLC was coming. But this was a much smaller DLC. There wasn't much content in it. And the reason we did it was really just to see what the process would be like. I'm a big believer in like trying out your tent in your yard before you go camping with it. There's a saying from the Ghost of the Darkness, like, don't go into battle with an untested rifle. It's kind of the same concept. So we wanted to do something small. The main thing that I learned out of this was if you're going to load things out of assets in Unity for a DLC as you're pushing it to other platforms, use asset bundles. The delta on the size of our build went from about 2.5 gigs to less than a half a gig by using asset bundles. There's a lot more to it than that, but I think that that's a really helpful distinction to make. It was a great lesson learned from doing that. So after we had done that, I was able to kind of think like, okay, this is what our work is going to look like. And as developers, often we think that like, oh, when I'm done building it and testing it, I can submit it and it can go. And for us, that works as long as we're talking about it. Then it just goes to itch and it's released. But the workflow for us is assets and code, so that I kind of separate those two, come into a build, we test it, and then we can submit directly to itch and it'll go out as a release. But where Whitethorn comes in as our publisher, is all of this is what they do, and they just kind of facilitate the distribution and all of the building, the coding that needs to happen for it to work on the newest versions of all of the dev kits, the building and the testing internally. If it fails any of those tests, it'll come back to us. They handle all the submissions to Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, and Valve. Then they will go through their internal testing processes, and at any of these points after any of this testing, you could come back to me and something where I'll have to make some adjustments in assets and code. And I'll say that I definitely get different failures in assets and code across. Did your partner get RE kits? I'm going to say yes to that thing. But so what all of this being like all these transitions kind of being lubricated by our developer has allowed us to be able to do DLCs. Otherwise, we would kind of still be working on the game itself. So that leads us to our next like real DLC and how we ended up doing it, or deciding on this as being the first real one or the first main one, which is the speedrun edition. Now, we were trying to make what I always thought in my brain, I still kind of see it as the guiding light of the game design, was Journey meets Mario 64. And at no point in time in there was I thinking speedrunners are going to like this and they're going to enjoy it. But what happened was, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, people, as we were demoing it, started really kind of finding a way to try to beat the lowest times. And so we started communicating with those folks, and this is kind of the focus of you can see the difference in aesthetics. This isn't necessarily what the final levels are going to look like, but you can see that all of the set dressing is kind of gone, so you can focus on like just pure speed running. And the time will be showing and the best time for the level. If you've exceeded the best, that's kind of hard to see here, but if you pass the best time of the level, it'll start showing in red. So whenever I'm working in designs, I always prefer to go like brain to paper to mock-ups and then go into the game itself. I know a lot of people like to jump directly into the code or directly into whatever 3D or 2D program with which they're working, but I find that really helpful. So I always do storyboards like this. It helps me understand on what I'll be working very, very quickly before I do the code. So I've already thought about it on 3 or 4 levels before I start jumping into the code. But like, how did we even end up? Oh, wait, I think it skipped. Okay, there. Okay, here we go. This is the actual side I was trying to get to, logging. So why did we end up doing Speedrun Edition? Well, while we were showing it live, the first time that we took it to, it was either the first or the second time we took it to 2DCon. This is the only picture I could find of it. You can probably see this little, there's a little whiteboard with sticky notes on there. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just lagging quite a bit sometimes here. But this sticky note thing here was really a leaderboard for people's times on specific levels. So every day we said, hey, come on in, and whoever gets the best time on this specific level is a different level each day, wins the top winner won a big 24x36 poster, 11x17 sticker packs and stuff like that throughout the weekend. So it was really a way for us to engage with people on site, and we weren't really thinking of it as like, but out of that came some people, and as you know, 2DCon, there's always a bunch of speedrunners there, and it became like kind of a thing that people very much latched onto, and so much so that eventually we had nothing to do with it, but there's one speedrunning Discord that is getting less and less busy as it's been over years. But I would just drop in there and be like, hey folks, these are the ideas that I've got for speedrunning mode. What do you think? And they came back with some really great ideas, like a new which is not something, Eric, you did get a poster, which is not something that I would have thought about. And so, of course, it's going to be called Newt Game Plus. But the coding for that is already done. That was pretty straightforward. I never would have thought about that without engaging with the computer or with the community this way. So this like kind of back and forth with people has really helped guide the project. And that means that we're going to get new music, and we're going to get new art, and the new music, because it's speed running, is a little bit different. I can do some kind of really funky things with it. So Newt One's music, also the vast majority of it was recorded when I was still living in LA, which was like 4 years ago. So I've got all kinds of new ideas. I'm using it in cajones, and I'm actually recording some melodica. Ari said when I sent him one of them, it makes me feel like I'm in the club. No one would have said that about any of the music that is in Newt One right now. So it's giving us an opportunity to kind of branch out and see how people would feel about this stuff. Ari has come up with a whole new character model. This is in game from a very kind of early version, and there are a bunch of different skins, the colored skins for this. So you'll be able to choose your skin, choose what music you want, choose which one of the challenge levels you want, and then start playing the game. So with this always comes new ideas. And one of the great things about working with one of my favorite Planet, Ari, who does all the art and level design, is he will just come up with an idea when he's having dinner, when sketch it out and send it to me and be like, hey, can we do this? Will this be able to work? And I go, no. And then I eventually go, yes, actually, I think I can. And he makes fun of me for it. So what we're looking to do is have a few different interesting things on each speedrunning level. And we're looking at least 2 DLCs that we're looking to release. So all of this really came from the concept of working not in a bubble, but being able to listen to feedback from other folks and really talk about what the direction of the game could be and would be at any point in time. So that's really it. That's what I've got. It's coming soon. I think that if you are interested in, Ari's art is just so great. I just kind of want to leave that up for a couple minutes. But if you're interested in doing or other ways that we'd like to communicate with people, like we've started playing with ideas of different ways just to connect with not just our audience, but people who like games in general, or in specific, like games that are maybe less violent than usual. We'd love to hear it. That's kind of what we're all about doing. And well, Commander Wisdom got up while I was talking about it, so she's running. I can't go get her anymore. But I'm Dark Chocolate on the IGDA. I'm Dev at DevNAri via email, Dark Chocolate on Instagram. I'm at Jana on Twitter, but honestly, I don't really use Twitter that often. It's a bit too much of a fire hose for me. If there are any questions or anything, just give me a holler, or I guess maybe we could do this now. It might be a couple minutes behind because the stream is a little bit behind what I can respond to. But thank you. This is totally different without actually having an audience. All right. Okay, those look like claps. Nailed it. Thank you, David. Accuse. Well, this isn't awkward at all.
I don't know if I should jump in. Can you hear me? Do you hear me, Dev?
I can hear you, Marty. Yeah.
Yeah. Can anyone on the stream hear me? That's a good question, because somebody thought they could hear me, and I was like, I don't know if they can hear me.
NPC Twitch asked.
Oh yeah, everybody can hear me. Nice.
Full controller support. Yes, everyone can hear you. So the controller support for Newt One is the native controllers for each of the consoles. So it supports Xbox One, Xbox 360, Switch Pro, and PS4 DualShock 4. And I think there's also Logitech F310. Like, I had a bucket of controllers I wrote controls for, but there's also I think it's just a controller.ini file that if you just email me and say, like, hey, my controller is working but not 100%, I don't know what to do with it, I'll just hop on Discord with you and help you put together the file. If custom controls.ini, I think is what it's called. I'll even make the file for you and send it to you. If you put that in the root folder, that'll override any of the controls in there. The update is getting released at the same time for all consoles. It will. This whole thing that has us in quarantine right now, kind of wrenching in our plans in general. There is something interesting that is going to happen about which I can't talk. But for Newt One, so we're gonna have that event first, and then we're gonna release the speedrun edition. But it'll be in some time in this. How did you coordinate that? How do you decide when to release each? Is a question from Leonix, and I'm trying to remember who's. That's Steven. Yeah. Okay. The F310 NPC Twitch, the F310, there is I have written controls for them. I'm not sure if they're active in the newest one, but yeah. And Steven asked, how do we coordinate the releases of all of them? We submit them all at the same time, and then whenever the last one gets approved, we release them all at the same time. Stefan, yeah. Stefan, like the curry. So what we do is we release them, we submit them like way. So if let's say I wanted it to come out at the end of April, I'm one of those people who thinks that things don't happen unless you're given deadlines. So I would actually submit it like everyone's like, yeah, give it 2 weeks to get approved. I would give it like 6 weeks to get approved. So it's part of why I'm saying it's going to be summer now, because we're going to be submitting sometime relatively soon, and then they'll get approved, and then we'll sit on that and wait until the very last one gets approved. And then once it has, we'll probably do a small marketing push for a week or two, or like as they start getting approved, we'll start doing the like coming soon stuff, and then the last one does, we'll have to get in there. It's on time is late is how I kind of look at things in life. So I prefer to get all this stuff done as early as possible. All right. So, yeah, I think that answers everything.
You've answered all the possible questions.
Everyone. All right.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dev. That's awesome.
My pleasure.
Yeah, all right, I'm going to switch back over to my lovely self here. And we're going to take like maybe a 10 or 15-minute intermission. I don't think I need to turn the stream off, but I do want to try and figure out this mic situation. Yeah, I got to make sure that my own audio isn't coming through the like desktop somehow, which it is right now, but yeah, all right. So we're gonna get started, I think, officially with people are trying to help me troubleshoot offline. Oh, okay, we're gonna get started with Mark's talk. I think probably, I mean, I said 7:30, but like let's aim for like 7:25 ish, maybe even 7:20. So enough time to go get some Cheetos or I guess pizza. Not enough time to get pizza, but maybe like you could make like a pizza, like a frozen pizza or something. Those take like 10 minutes, right? So yeah. I will just pause the stream here and we'll see you back. I mean, obviously you can keep chatting. Please keep chatting. And I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, but of course you can still hear me for the same reason that... Okay, I'm going to turn it off now. Hey, okay, welcome back. I just picked an arbitrary point to cut that song off, actually. Um, Here we go. Uh, so, I got Mark here. There's still going to be some like resizing of screen, I think, that needs to happen, but let's go ahead and cut over to Mark. Here we go. No, that is not Mark. Let's give me a second. It's funny. Okay. That should be Mark. Oh, look at that. And the aspect ratio all looks good. Amazing.
Everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you, and I hope that means
I'm gonna
everyone
wait
else
6
can.
seconds to learn.
Oh, shoot. Can no one hear me except you?
Okay,
Can
great. I guess I'll get right started. This is 2 years of Widget Satchel. I have many slides. Anyone who knows me is not surprised by this. So buckle up, and I'll try to get through them as quick as I can. But first, I want to talk about Nice Games Alliance. This is something I brought up at the last in-person meeting, and we were supposed to meet this month to start putting some of that together. Of course, that's not happening. We have a whole other plan today, but no worries. We're going to find a backup solution, and it's going to be on the Slack. So I created a Slack channel, Nice Games Alliance. You see it there. Go ahead and join that sucker and just make yourself known. And once we get a little bit of a group going, we'll set a time to do a virtual meeting there, rather than tying it to these meetings, because now that everything's virtual, not as important that we tie it all together. So that's still in the works, just a little bit different. And any ideas you have onto how to make that successful, that'd be great. If you don't know what Nice Games Alliance is, contact me on Slack or my email there, mark@noblerobot.com. I can tell you all about it, but that's not what I'm here for today. I'm here to talk about Widget Satchel. So Widget Satchel was a game that a bunch of us made for the DevNAri 40 Game Jam, and this was in December 2017. So, a bit over 2 years ago now. We worked on it for 2 years. It released on PC and Switch November 2019, the week of Thanksgiving. And of course, it was mentioned in the chat, but Widget Satchel is on sale right now for 6 more hours for the National Ferret Day promotion. It's half off. Partly because it is, quarantine times, and so everyone's being a little bit more deep with their discounts. And I figured, why not? And tying it to a day we always wanted to release the game on National Ferret Day, and you'll hear that come up twice in my presentation. But go ahead and take a peek at that. Steam and Switch and Itch on sale, all 3 platforms, for another couple hours. So check that out. All right, so let's talk about the jam. So this is the first version of the game, December 1st to the 4th, 2017. So this was Lane's idea. Lane in the chat, woot woot. We were all hanging out, and I think at a play test, and Lane was like, I've always wanted to do one of those DevNAri, those online jams. And then the 4 of us were the ones standing near him. So that's how that happened. And you can see we're all marked here on this lovely illustration. My wife, Dale, in the corner, she helped us out planning and producing and making sure I had enough tissue boxes, because you can see there, I was actually quite sick this weekend, and I didn't remember that until I saw these photos. DevNAri 40, the theme for the jam was the more you have, the worse it is. And so we wanted to do something where it's a platformer where the coins you collect actually have weight. That was the simple idea. Fairly literal interpretation, but we thought we could really do a lot with that in terms of making sort of puzzle mechanics out of sort of standard platforming instead of a puzzle platformer. And, it's an online jam, so you can do it from wherever. But we wanted to have kind of a global game jam style setup, because I think that's what we were kind of used to, those of us in this group. So we rented out the party room in my building and set up a little remote office for us to camp out in for those 4 days. And it worked out pretty good. The game's about a ferret because Sarah, our musician, likes ferrets, and for no other reason. Some of the best ideas are arbitrary, and then you find ways to justify them later. And I think that's something that I've always been very comfortable with. I always want things to mean things, but sometimes you just pick something by random, and that's where it starts. And so that's where that started. A little bit of close-up. We were already during the jam, practicing a task assigning, sort of proper project management techniques. You can see we had some words of the game, things that we wanted to have in it. We didn't get socks in the game for long after this, but it was right away we wanted to. And you can see there a game idea, which must have been the first inspiration, the first expression of what Widget Satchel was, is lost to time because of that glare. So I really have no idea what that says. Here is the jam version in a GIF form. It's the gameplay loop, more or less. The thing about this version of the game is that it has almost everything that the game shipped with. I mean, there are many more things that it shipped with also, but we didn't really change much from the initial core design. It's a sort of a tumbly platformer, awkward character, and you collect widgets, you knock out bots with your doohickeys, and that's it. The thing about it, though, is that everything in this image was completely replaced, redesigned, or rebuilt, but you wouldn't necessarily know it from playing the final game, and that was something that if you've done a prototype and then you sort of build off a prototype, that's something you're familiar with. But we had actually had, with a game jam game, it would live somewhere between a prototype and a first draft. And so, but we treated it a lot like a prototype, and bit by bit, things just got replaced in it, sort of like the ship of Theseus. Basic mechanics, 3 short levels, no fail platforming. So you couldn't die in Widget Satchel. And the reason is because we did not program that. So that became, we leveraged that. We said, okay, we don't got time to make a whole loop or reload the level and have a death animation and all that stuff. So we're just not going to do it. And we're going to make a game where that's not part of the mechanics. And that is a theme, I think, with Widget Satchel is even when we had the time to work on stuff, we sort of, when we made decisions, we let other decisions flow from them rather than let other decisions overrule them. And so that's something we did here. We have these weight puzzles. So you pick up too many widgets, suddenly you can't jump to the next platform to get the high value widgets. So the proper pathing is to skip a couple widgets, which is hard to do. You have to avoid them, get the higher out of reach later one, then backtrack. So that was the initial concept for the platforming in the game. And that was in the jam version. We had enemy bots that would chase you if you had too many widgets. And we had a fabricator where you could build the doohickeys. So now it's a Metroidvania, which I didn't think of it at the time, but that is definitely what we ended up building. And you see we have 3 doohickeys. The wrench, you can hit bots. Anti-grav plate lowers the weight, so kind of interacting with those puzzle mechanics. We didn't end up doing a lot with that mechanic in the jam. And then Jeff's boots, which was a recognized Jet boots that was written on the whiteboard. We could call it Jeff's boots. So some guy named Jeff made these boots, and they let you double jump. The game had 100 widgets and about 3 to 5 minutes of playtime. So not a ton of content, but all the systems were kind of in place. Response we had was very good. So you can see these are some of the comments from the DevNAri comment thread. And I put a couple of fancy laurels up there for our placement, which was not like, top 5 or whatever, but very high out of like thousands and thousands of entries. We got top 100 in music, top 100 in graphics, and 7% overall. So we felt pretty good about that, especially because none of us had done a DevNAri before. We were unfamiliar with the way that they ranked games. And so we felt pretty emboldened by that. And what people said, which is especially in this one here at the bottom, solid game. I wish there was more to it. So we well, if that's the case, let's make more to it. So you can see here, this is an archive of our earliest Slack conversations after the jam, a week or so after. And you can see Lane and I had a conversation about it, and everybody came on board. So this was the big mistake that damned us all to 2 years of working on this thing. But we were all pretty excited about it. And you can see we even established some scope here. A couple more levels, I was even finishing up a level, a little more design, just a little bit more. That was kind of the idea. And my goal here, and you can see that in the comment thread, is I wanted to do the publishing legwork. Like, that was my goal, is to learn how the backend stuff works. I mean, we've been working on prototypes and we've been building games for years, but none of us in this group had published a game, at least published one ourselves. So that was something I wanted to do because I was working on a big project of my own, Metro Nexus, that I really wanted to have I didn't want to make all my mistakes with that one. So the goal here was, this is a low stakes project, so let me make my mistakes with this one. So that was the idea. So fairly soon after we decided to do it, I built this little master plan for what I thought the levels might look like. I sort of sketched out, you can see they're color coded. And you sort of descend through this space station, and you can see I sort of sketched up a little opening area where Sprocket escapes from. None of this is in the jam version. And then also an end point to the game where you escape the station. So you're just a mischievous little animal trying to get outside the station. And a couple of notes here on what each level might have kind of a theme or a twist to give the short runtime that we planned for it some variety. So that's the end of the jam version, right? So now we're in this era where we said, let's just shove it out on Steam, right? Let's put something together. Let's finish this game that we have already. It's what it is, and let's finish it. That was the goal. And then let's put it on Steam, because that's easy to do. And so we started having regular design meetings. And one of the things I wanted to do very early on was to say, hey, I want to be a little more structured about this. I don't want this just to live in our backlog and us to return to every now and again. We all have other things going on. We have jobs, we have gigs, we have other projects that are, maybe more demanding or more worthy of our time. So let's schedule some time for this so we can actually move the ball forward on it. And so that was a decision we made early on that was really, I think, beneficial. It was hard to maintain, but it, I think, is the reason the project got finished, all told, all that time later. But in our earliest meetings, we decided on these 5 levels, this color scheme, and we decided on 5 doohickeys. And what these doohickeys were and how they worked evolved and settled slowly. It wasn't immediate. We had, we did try some things out, but we knew that we couldn't build levels until we knew how all this was, until we made decisions about this stuff. And so that's why we focused on those early meetings. And you can see my inspiration for these levels, these color codings, this screenshot here from the Andromeda Strain. Anybody know that movie? I'll wait 6 seconds. No, never mind. And in that you move through this underground bunker level by level, and it has these different colors, and it's this pop psychology about the psychological effect of colors. Is all nonsense, but I love that movie, and I thought that would be a fun thing to pay homage to in the game. So you can see here, level 4, the green one. This was the art that I designed for the jam, but then was going to be level 4 in the game. So leveraging what we already had. So during this time, one of the things that I really wanted to do is learn how to use Unity. So, I'd done Unity actually more for VR projects than for standard games, certainly not 2D games. And so I really dove in, and my job was to, build the tools we needed to create the content that we were going to make, which was going to be everybody else's job. And so I really had a lot of fun with this. It was wonky. It was creative. It kind of hit all my buttons. And so I had a really a good time with that. And it leveraged what I wanted from this project, which was to learn things that would help me on the next project, right? All the way to the end of this thing, even as it got bigger and bigger and became more a central part of my life and something I cared more and more about. The goal was always, this is for learning new things. And this is where it started. And we needed a few things. So, we were thinking about like just taking a month or two to polish it up. But we slowly figured out that wasn't going to be the case. And so even the modest additions we made to it were starting to add up. But it also gave us a lot of inspiration. Like, oh, with this plus this, we can do these 8 things. And so it got really, really exciting to imagine all we could do with it. And so we sort of, okay, it's time now to figure out really how long this is going to take and not these few months that we thought. And this is also the time when I decided, okay, I've got to take Metro Nexus. I got to set it aside. I can't be working on both these projects at the same time. I'm going to work on this till it's done, and whatever else comes along the way. But this is going to be my main thing, and then I'll go back to Metro Nexus later, and I can talk a little bit more about what that has meant to me, later, or maybe during Q&A, because it's really interesting sort of personal journey for me these past 2 years, and especially now that I'm getting back to Metro Nexus. Okay, so it's a console game now. That's the header for this category. Spring through early fall 2018, the big chunk. This is where almost all of the design elements of the game were realized and finalized. So maybe it wasn't where all the work was done, but it was where all of it became real, right? Where it was potential, and then later it was a slog, and here it was where it was really happening, right? So what we call special geometry, so things like doors, pillars, one-way platforms, collapsible trap doors, lifts, belts, belts on lifts would come later, but just all the different kind of systems, getting the camera to work, working with cutscenes, forming the structure of the game, how it would move from scene to scene. This is where a lot of that work happened. But at the same time, the fun to work ratio was starting to shrink because now it was a real project, right? And so this is something I was trying to keep an eye on, because at this point I was sort of saying, okay, I'm starting to manage this team now, because I was the one who was sort of most invested and had the most time. So I had the most time to give to this. So it was sort of on me to sort of keep track of everybody's enthusiasm level and make sure that it was kind of working. But it was a bit of a challenge to get through this, because this is when it first became like, oh, this is really going to take a while. Even though we were relatively realistic and we adjusted our schedules as we needed to. And our first big internal deadline was working on a demo that we were going to then submit to Xbox and Nintendo. So we thought, well, we can shove that on Steam. That's great. But one of the things I wanted to learn was how console publishing worked, and that sort of that back end. So why don't we go through those processes, which I'd learned a lot about at previous GDCs and from talking to other devs. So I'm like, okay, this will be great. And this is also a time when we lost Lane. Lane had too much stuff to do and had too many other projects. And once we realized what the priority needed to be, I think he wisely said, I'm not going to string you along. I'll just need to step aside for now. And he turned from our lead developer into our biggest fan. So the great thing about Lane is he was always around to give us feedback, to chime in on our ideas, to play test for us. And so that ended up being a tough transition, but it ended up being really, really nice in a different way. So it was really cool. And that was something we tried to maintain, is keeping an eye on everybody's commitment level. And I don't know how great a job I did of that overall. You could probably privately ask the other team members and they'll tell you honestly. But that was an example where we faced a time where it could have gone worse. And I think that transition went pretty well. So building levels. So this is where, we first started to structure, like, how are we going to actually, let's build a system to build this thing. And so we had this concept called blocks, where each chunk of the level would be independently designed, and it would be its own kind of thing. So it would have a single challenge, it would have a single reward, or it would be an alternate path. And these weren't hard and fast rules, but they were a way for us to assign sections of the game to the different developers, because we were all designing these parts of the levels. And then once we had put together a sort of a demo of how this worked, then we would stitch them all together in whatever order made sense. So that was our sort of design, our idea to be sort of efficient with this sort of thing. So you can see I have a list, sort of a taxonomy on how these blocks will be described. And there's a little bit of a peek in the back here of a spreadsheet that we put together on how this was going to work. One moment. Let's see how long I can go without taking another sip. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to address in the game was having where each block would have multiple paths, multiple goals, multiple ways to approach them. This is something that I feel pretty strongly about in a lot of the design work that I do, but this is something that worked really well for the concept of our game, which is getting doohickeys with your widgets. You could get whatever you could afford. And so we didn't know what the player would have, right? A lot of Metroidvanias will let you go anywhere, but they'll hard lock you to a place that you can't reach until you get a certain power up. We didn't work that way. In our game, because it's still a no-fail platformer, you should be able to not pick up a single widget or get a single doohickey and just waltz your way through the game. So in order to keep that working, we needed to make something to incentivize the player to stick around, to try these optional challenges that the game was being presented with. But also, we didn't know what power-ups you had. So if we invited you to do these optional challenges by not blocking you, but then we would stymie you in a way because you needed this one thing, but without properly communicating what you needed. So we needed to have a system where if you couldn't do it, it was obvious what you needed to do it. And if you couldn't do it, maybe if you were clever, you could use another method. So you see these bots here and you get the boots and you're like, oh, I can jump on these, but I don't have the boots. So you kind of wander through and you're like, hey, there's that switch. I can hit that with a wrench, and I have the wrench. And then you end up and you realize you reached the place where the boots would have gotten you. So we want the players to feel a little bit clever and kind of uncover the space as they do that. So I just did this illustration to kind of show to the team, like, kind of what I wanted, like a simple expression of how I wanted to do that. We found really interesting ways to make that work through the rest of the game. We were also focusing on tutorialization at this time because the jam made a lot of sense because people read the description before they played it, and they didn't have any expectations of knowing how it worked, right? You've played a jam game, you're like, what's all this then? And then you're like, oh, I have no idea. Okay, I'll read the description. Okay, now I know. That's the sort of like use case for playing a jam game. In this case, we couldn't rely on that because that's not how people play games normally. So we had to build these things. So this is the tutorial room, this GIF you'll see. This section after every fabricator in the game where, depending on what doohickey you get, it modifies that room to require you to use the doohickey. So it teaches you how to do it without giving you any modal dialogues, without explaining anything to you. You just have to futz around until it works. And that is the only time in the game where you are actually prevented from progressing unless you do something. But at this point, we as the developer know what tools you have, so we can block you in this case. And that proved to be extremely useful because the magnet and the boots in particular, people didn't quite understand what they were for, or they made guesses about that were reasonable, but we needed to make them explicit. Otherwise, they would kind of feel silly. And so this worked out really, really well. The other thing we did during this time is we added our level 0, which is that sort of that area of the bridge. We added tutorial elements to that so that you could teach the main mechanics of the game, the weight system, that widgets have weight, that sort of thing, the different tiers of weight. So it's not just every widget makes you a little heavier, as we have little thresholds, and sort of explaining that to the player in a way. And we were a little more explicit with that. But we were making sure in this period, before we sent off this demo, to actually make the game approachable. We also wanted to have something called Mischief. And this was an idea I had very, very early on that I took forever to implement. But it was always a core part of it. And we all liked the idea, even if it wasn't super solid right away. It solves a problem. The game is such where you can't lose and you never die. So all the challenges are optional. And that means that the game isn't hard, but if you want it to be hard, it's kind of too hard. And so there's not really like a middle ground. And so if you just waltz through, it's easy but boring. So we wanted to reward players and make it enjoyable for them to just goof off and run around. So the character had a lot of charm, rolled around. It was kind of silly. So that was really useful. But we wanted there actually be some mechanical advantage and also something literally to do with your time if you weren't completing these optional challenges. And so that's what junk was all about. And so you can see I developed this junk physics. So you see this in a lot of games where you like move through like fields of grass or flowers. You don't actually collide with them. You kind of brush them aside. We did that, but we applied that to actual physics objects that could go anywhere. So you could actually push something all the way down the level without too much trouble, but you never really actually collided with it according to the game engine. So it didn't impact platforming in any way. You couldn't trip over anything, but it still felt like sort of naturally like you were running into stuff. And so once we had that system working, we had to apply to all sorts of stuff. So bots could move things around. Exploding barrels could knock things around. If you swatted something, it pushed it, but if you wrenched it, it flew further. And so you can kind of play with it kind of like a sandbox. And then we just dumped junk all over the place. And it was kind of a lazy solution, but it ended up being perfect. We ended up not needing much more than that to make that enjoyable if you weren't, say, engaging with a lot of the challenges. Now, the key is that we wanted to also make it mechanically rewarding. So we wanted to give you points for goofing off. So if you pushed a box halfway through the level from where it started, then you get X number of mischief points or something like that. We weren't really sure how we were going to do this. And that system took too long to make. So we did eventually ship with it. But one of my regrets is that we didn't nail it down a little bit sooner. But I think it is a successful part of the game. It just isn't quite as fully baked as maybe it should have been, at least at the time we were developing it here. Also here, UI and narrative, really important. And they're really linked in a way I didn't quite expect. We did a lot of brainstorming in our Slack about, what is this space station? Who are these people? What are their names? What are their personalities? What are their backstories? And none of that matters to the player because you're just running around as a ferret the whole time. But we wanted to use one of the answers to those things so that they could inform a lot of the lore and a lot of the visual styling that you see as you go through. But also the UI, like what a modal box looks like, what a cutscene looks like. Is dialogue between two characters, or is it just one person doing a voiceover, captain's log style? Those choices were linked. So we ended up doing cutscenes where at a cutscene, except for the final one because it's special, in cutscenes, you only have one character speaking and they're doing a log, right? And so that informed what kind of story it was. And it was something that we had kind of a B plot. So as Sprocket is running through the station knocking stuff over, after each level, we check in with the humans to see what they're up to. And what they're up to is dealing with the consequences of Sprocket's nonsense. And we explain it in a way that they don't actually know what's going on. So it's kind of cute and charming. And that's fantastic. But a lot of that was informed by the narrative and the visual, how to communicate the information, the UI of it. They needed to be developed together. And that's something I didn't quite expect when we were sort of starting that process. And there were certain things, we had great ideas for really fun things about scenes with the players, with the humans, a lot of animation, ways that Sprocket would interact with the humans, but it just became way too out of scope. And so once we figured out what our scope was, then we could tell the story that fit it without feeling like it was, trying to break free of that, which I think you see a lot in indie games where they tell bigger stories than their tech allows them. Try to kind of avoid that. And you can also see here the localization system of the game was something that I just wanted to build, even though I had no ambitions whatsoever to use it. And you can see even the examples here that are in there are just Google Translate, the ones that do exist. And I was not intending to ship with it, but I just wanted to build the system now, just in case. And it paid off later, but I did not expect it to. So that's not really foresight. That's more like just getting lucky. Okay, so this whole period was about getting on consoles, and we did. Every 2 months we got on a new console. And PlayStation's pretty simple. I believe it still works this way, where you just go through the Byzantine process of signing a million forms and going through a VPN, and it's just utterly complicated and designed for a PS2 era. But you can just do it. You can self-publish on PlayStation. They ask you to prepare a game design document, but it's mostly just to know that you're not like a crazy person, or you're not just trying to like get access to a dev kit to sell it somewhere. They want to know you're a real game developer, but they don't care what your game is. And so that was the one I did first, because I knew I wasn't going to have to wait weeks and weeks for a reply. I wasn't going to have to wait for approval, and this timeline worked out. So we did that. And at that time, then now I have a big game design document that I've worked up, because we didn't design this from a game design document. So we needed those materials to submit to Xbox, which has a nice form to get access to their dev backend and get their free dev kits. Hooray. Not so free with PlayStation, sadly. And once we got through that process, what was submitted to Xbox, then all the stuff I prepared for that, I then now had a format that I could then send to Nintendo, because Nintendo at that time, and that only recently changed, they're like, just send us an email. And so I was like, okay, what do you mean by send us an email? And they're like, really, just send us an email. And it's like so nerve-wracking, because everyone wants their game on a Nintendo, right? And so when they say just send an email, you're like, oh, there's got to be some secret sauce to it, right? There's got to be some magic phrase or like some interesting format. And like the truth is, just send them an email. Like it really is that simple. And even me saying it, I still don't believe it, but that's what it is. So I put together a pitch email with not too much GIFs in it, and not a lot of attachments, short enough. And I didn't really know, so I sent it to them around a little after we did the Xbox pitch, and it was about a month or so, I think. Well, I guess I have it here. It was about 2 months before, about a month and a half, 2 months before they got back to me. And I think they were going through a backlog. I have no idea how their black box system works. And they said, hey, can you send us some more information in this exact format? And they sent me an example PDF of another game that had allowed them to use it as an example, one of the Switch launch titles, indie launch titles. Just a 2-page PDF with sort of a bunch of the stuff that I'd already sent them. I really had already sent them all this stuff in the format I did, but they said, okay, we want it exactly in this format. And my first reaction was like, you could have told me this earlier. You could have told everybody this earlier. Why is this secret? But also fine. So I got that email on a Friday, and I'm like, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put this together, and I'm going to get it to them so that when they get into work on Monday, they're going to have it waiting for them. So just to know that I'm a real go-getter, right? And I don't know if any of this matters. So I work on it on the weekend, get the information of this nice PDF, really cool document, nice and fun looking. Not quite a pitch deck, but sort of. And then I sent it to them just after midnight on Sunday night. And you can see here, less than 12 hours later, they reply and go, congratulations, you're approved. So either they got it and they're like, wow, this is a real go-getter. Or they got it and they're like, oh, they replied to the email, they must be real. Or they got it and they were really impressed, which is probably the least likely of the possibilities. It's still a black box Nintendo. But we got Switch access. So that was really exciting. It took a little while to wait for them to get back in the first place, but once I got in touch with them, they're actually quite easy to talk to, which is kind of cool. So getting the game working on all the consoles was like a fun, cool thing. And like, even if it's like a waste of time, if you're not going to be like targeting those platforms, if you have access to them, like there's something joyous about, playing your game on a PlayStation, playing it on an Xbox. Like there's something, it maybe shouldn't be so exciting. We should all feel as proud to pitch, to ship something on itch, but there is something a little bit, because of the silliness and all the NDAs and stuff, which is nonsense, and it's a topic of another talk, there's still a fun, magical feeling about it. And so that was a really exciting moment for me in particular. And the team was all shouting to the rafters about it, of course. Okay. So also in this time, building these big systems that just had one purpose. So a lot of the early design was about being able to build things we could make the most efficient use of our time, but you can't build your entire game that way. So the shuttle bay is the end of the game, where it's the sort of the climax of it, right? And so I spent an entire month working on the final level. And ended up being more of an epilogue than a finale to the game. And I didn't quite realize that when I was making it. And I'll learn that lesson later. But it was like a whole month of just working on this and nothing else, as the rest of the team was still putting together their work as well. This is a fun slide full of shuttlecraft. Enjoy my shuttlecraft. I really enjoy coming up with the names for these and the purposes of them, as well as the descriptions as you try to fabricate them. So that was a blast. Had a really good time sort of building out the world of Widget Satchel through the little hints that you get in these things. Okay. So the sort of last part of this is, just these big complex systems, building save data, camera system, building Sprocket's collection, or as it was later termed, stash, which is a term I resisted for a while because I was dumb and didn't realize it was the perfect word. And so getting all that going was really useful and helpful, but it ate up a lot of the time. And also during that time, I spent a lot of time on things that I had to redo later, or stuff that never got finished. So here is Pinion, our charming player 2. We wanted a sort of a Sonic and Tails kind of notion, and this was something that I think I had the idea really, really early that we should totally do a co-op mode, but we never ever intended to ship it with the first version. I don't think, even when we discussed it as a group, I don't think anybody ever wanted that, because we knew it was out of scope. We wanted to make it easy to build later, but I took some time because I was bored and I needed something to excite me in the project to, create Pinion as a character. But that walk cycle has been staring at me for a year. And I just am desperate to add it to the game. So one day maybe. But also like having motion controls in the game. We're on Switch now, so why not? But the truth is, it maybe wouldn't have been that hard to implement, but like no one's asking for it. So even though it's kind of a fun, SWAT with your own human swatter, it just never got made. So there's a lot of work that ended up just getting set aside in this time, and that happens, right? And I was trying to do as little of that as possible, but it was still happening. And then dealing with bugs, you see at the bottom here, we just had like all these persistent bugs because we had jam code, we still haven't gutted out yet. We were in that process, and we had to decide like, what are we going to rebuild? What are we going to refine? What are we going to replace? What are we going to go to third-party tools for? And I don't know that we did a great job in each instance of getting the right answer to those things. But yeah, it was really tricky to sort of decide what was worth overhauling and what was worth refining. And I think we all had a lot of trouble with that. All right, so we really, the game is now like, we have everything we need. We know how it works. All the systems are designed, right? So let's actually build the rest of this stuff. So we needed to build the rest of the levels because we'd only built this demo. We'd only built less than half the game. So at this time, we added Ellen and Martha as level designers, and this was like one of the best decisions we made to go for a level sprint. So we had been doing regular meetings for certain amounts of time throughout this whole process, but we decided we needed to have an actual weekly, multi-hour session where we all got together, we all worked on the levels to finish the rest of all through level 4 and 5. And so during this time, Nice Games Club, now the entire Nice Games Club podcast hosts, all three of us were now working on Widget Satchel. And so we decided, well, if we're going to be spending some time on this project now and taking it away from whatever else we would have be like to doing during this time in our lives, let's take this other side project that we're all part of and maybe let's set that one aside a bit. So we had been publishing one episode a week every week for at that point years of the few years that we've been doing the show, and it was a point of pride for me that from the very first week we never missed one. And so, but at the time it was like, what, this kind of matters more. So we did reruns and it was actually kind of successful. So we ended up doing it again the year after for another reason. So it's now a tradition of the show. But we wanted to clear up time and we wanted to make sure that everybody wasn't overtaxed, so that the time we devoted would be time that we could give to the game. And so so that was that. Everyone's working on levels, still other things happening, but that was the main purpose. And then I was mainly focused on tools. So I was back to building things for everybody. So that was a really fun moment for me. I got to put things together. And this is where Martha tells us, hey, I would like to make a conveyor belt that's on a lift. Can you do that? And I was like, oh, no, but why the hell can't you do that? And so little things like that were really valuable to, not only getting the things made, but just the fact that by this time, Steven and I, who were the main developers on the game at this time, we had kind of not run out of ideas exactly, but we were like settled, right? We didn't have the capacity, and we'd been so scared of overscoping that we were resistant to changing a lot or adding a lot. And then all Martha had to say was, can we do this? And it's like, it's clear as day. Of course you can. And yeah, it'll take a tiny bit of time to do, but that's time worth spending. And so that's another lesson that I think I learned was like, I try to be militant about keeping in scope, but sometimes you gotta add some new stuff. Sometimes, not all the time, Lane, sometimes. All right. So, all right, here's level 4. So with the previous levels, we designed these blocks independently, and then we stitched them together in whatever order made sense. We swapped them around a little bit as we worked on them, then we sort of settled into what the levels were going to work. But with level 4, we did this in advance. So we were like, this is how it's going to work. In this section, we want a kind of a platforming style section. In here, we want these sort of this areas of where we had sort of prototyped earlier. We had a section we'd already built, already had part of built to be like, oh, this would be a perfect place for that. But before working on any further, we made all these decisions. And so you can see these blank spaces are sort of designing kind of what it would look like. But not really knowing. So this, we just wanted to be kind of crazy, but just sort of a general idea of what the level would look like. And then this is as it moves on. This is the part that I was spending a lot of time on, which is painting the levels. So you can see in some of the earlier slides, and in here you can see the sort of like white box implementation. And that was something we did where our level designers were not in charge of making the thing look nice or doing the tiling. We wanted to just focus on the mechanics and how it feels, and so we can get as quick as possible from idea to implementation. And then I built the system to sort of add the art to this. The sad part was that I was never able to properly teach it to anyone else on the team. And I think that's, I designed it with like a lot of my own inner workings, thinkings in mind. And I made an attempt and, bless the team. They tried to understand how I put it together, but it wasn't, I think I failed to make it so that I could distribute that work. And so that ended up eating just a ton of my time because initially I was like, oh, I'll save them the time and I'll take care of it. But then when I needed them to help me with it, I wasn't able to teach it because it was just too obtuse and too particular to my way of thinking. So that's level 4. Level 5 is where the game ends. And this is where the concept from the original sketches way back changed a lot, mostly because it wasn't super defined. But we wanted to make level 5 kind of a candy bag, right? It was a treat. So everything in level 5 is optional. Everything in the whole game is optional. But in level 5, you can make your way all the way to the end without ever jumping over a single pit. So every section in level 5 would be optional, but it would give you a fun reward. It would also unlock a checkpoint. So there would be a little bit more to it. And then these could be just fun ideas that we hadn't gotten around to, things that we wanted to do but didn't find a place for them in earlier levels. And so that was a really effective way of reusing the sort of thinking we'd already been doing, if not to reuse the actual work we'd already been doing. So that was really fun. And then, Martha got to design a bounce house, which is just bouncing around. Like that's what the purpose of it was. And Ellen got to design her junk pit, which was actually the only section in the game where you used junk in a way to mechanically to get a reward, which is really nice, but also had just piles and piles of explosives, which was her forte, and really wanted, she's more barrels, more explosives every time. And who could say no to that? So that was really fun. We got to have, do some more pure gameplay in level 5. But this was the climax the game needed, right? So the shuttle bay wasn't the climax. So we needed something that felt really like powerful, really, this is the end of the game. And so my idea was for a thing called Plinko, which if you've seen Plinko on Price is Right, it's just a thing falling down a thing. And so that's where the inspiration comes from. I wanted to have something where once you reach the end of level 5, you go through all the optional things, then you have this section here, which is the final element of the game. And at this point, you've collected a ton of widgets. You're very heavy. But because you're falling, you can now jump again. So you're no longer limited. So you now have a little bit of your platforming ability back. And you get just tons and tons of widgets. So the thing I haven't talked about is that one of the things we did in this game is that we give you a lot of widgets early, and then we teach you to preserve them, because if you lose them, you can never get them back, right? So that's the challenge of the game that's optional for you. If you really want to buy all the doohickeys, you got to hold on to every damn widget. And so what that meant is that as the game got on, widgets got sparser and sparser and sparser. And this was by design, but it was frustrating a lot of our playtesters. But it was too late to change, right? This was one of the things that we had decided, like, once we make a decision about how this thing works, we're going to have to design everything else around it. That was too fundamental to change. We couldn't go back and make everything worth half as much. And so you'd collect twice as many things. It just didn't work. So Plinko was a way to solve that. Plinko was a way of saying you can get 1 billion widgets and you can still jump around. And we make the shuttles, which you then, at the end of this, you go to the shuttle bay to get your last reward. The shuttles will cost a ton of widgets. So this was meant to be a big surprise after you've been like starved in the sort of widget desert for level 4, to actually have a section where it just gave you tons of them, but they were all kind of hard to get. And every one you missed, you kind of felt like, ah, dang, because you really only had one shot at it. It was very different from anything else in the game. And so this was like the final boss of the game. And you can see this isn't the final version because it sort of ends out there. There was some resistance to this as a concept because it was so different from how the rest of the game worked. My idea was that was the point of it. But I also agree that maybe we could have made this a little bit more elegant, maybe teased a similar concept earlier in the game, rather than just like totally giving it to you at the end, especially because we teach you that widgets are rare and valuable. And then suddenly you can just get a billion of them. And the player doesn't realize that it's now past the point where they have value. But that's how it works in the game, and that's how we can justify it. But the player doesn't always know that. So it's an imperfect solution, but it ended up being a great conclusion to the game. I think players did understand that this is it. This is the end, right? After this, the end scene or whatever's going. So it ended up making the epilogue of the shuttle bay feel like a good breather in that moment. So I'm pretty happy with how that worked out. But at this point, we're having to design this whole system, right? So every single widget we add to any part in the game now changes how the whole thing works, because this is a concept we had really early on that Steven was really committed to and really did a lot of the legwork to make it happen, which is the optimal path. So you can ignore everything and just rush through start to finish, no problem. But if you do that, you can maybe buy one doohickey early on, maybe another doohickey a level or two later, and you end the game with 2 or 3 doohickeys. And you're like, how are you supposed to actually get everything? Can you get everything? And so we wanted to slowly reveal that yes, there's a better way. You can try going this way. You can route through level 1 in a way that you can get the most expensive doohickey right away, and then that will then give you access to more widgets. And so we wanted the players to learn this optimal path, and there is only one optimal path, as far as we know. Playtesters and speedrunners could maybe try to outfox us, and that's actually kind of exciting. But we designed a single way to get through the game, and we decided this is what you get at these different fabricators. This is how many widgets you collect on the way through, and we needed to keep that straight in our minds, because anytime we needed to make a change where we like moved a section around or turned these 3 widgets into 5 widgets and then moved those 5 widgets to 3 widgets to balance things out differently because this was too hard or this needed to have a bigger reward. We had to go back to this master document and say, did we break it? And the truth is, a tiny minute fraction of players it's going to affect at all. But it was something that we cared about a lot early on, and we did a lot of work. Steven particularly did a lot of work to make that work that we but it ended up being kind of fragile. So we needed to create this document to keep track of it. And so, we're punching through, we're adding all this content, we're making these things final, and there's just the same bugs over and over and over again. And this was driving me absolutely crazy. And I think this is a part of any project. But at this point, we hadn't, not that we didn't expect there to be bugs, right? Like no one doesn't expect that. But the more planning you do, I think, the more your heart breaks because your plans get foiled more often. And so there's kind of a 2 sides to that. And that definitely happened in this process where I was thinking like, oh, I want to do a lot of that stitching together. I want to paint everyone's lovely blocks. I don't want to be just focusing on bugs, but I was doing a lot of my time on that. And so we were falling behind, right? And that's something that just happens all the time. And one of the things we were pretty good at is when we fell behind, we knew it, and then we were able to quickly reassess. So it's maybe frustrating we did that more often than we would have liked, but if we had done it less, then we would have hurt more later on. So this is the sort of period, and if this is happening to you on a project, you know that you're about halfway done. So that's the thing. That's one of the things I learned, is that once you get to that point, I didn't know it then, but I'm like, okay, the game is halfway to release. Also during this time, I was really excited about playtesting with kids because of the game had this 2 sides to it. Of being really hard if you wanted to get everything, but really easy if you just stumbled through. I wanted to see how kids reacted to it. And so those are my nephews and then the main image there. And then we took it to a playtest event that I think Beth organized, right? Someone correct me if that's not the case, where a bunch of kids got to play Widget Satchel. And that was really nice to see. I think the charm went a long way for that. But I wanted a game where a kid could play it and play a lot of it, right? Beat it, not get stuck on level 2 the way I was in Contra. And then when they got a little older, could come back to it and master it. And so this was me testing that. And this is about the time when I was really invested in that as a concept. We didn't do a lot of wide scale playtesting, so I don't know exactly how successful that is, but it's something I feel is very important. All right, so now we've been working on this game for a year, and it's done. Game is done. It's playable start to finish. You can even play it with 2 NES controllers attached to the Switch, which is like the most comfortable way to play. So I recommend it. And you can see Steven did a playthrough to sort of test everything, and he pointed out a bunch of bugs that we had to fix and did a bit of QA testing. But there's his reaction. We did a good job, y'all. This game's really fun, and I think that's the moment when like the game as we knew it was sort of finished, right? It wasn't going to be any changes at this point. There were going to be additions and corrections and polishing, but we finished it, right? And we did not know that it was still going to be another many months before release. We were hoping to maybe release it by National Ferret Day a year ago. That did not happen. But at this time, now we're just focusing on things that can help us release. So implementing Switch specific features. So you can see we had our custom socks for the different platforms. We of course we didn't get to the PlayStation or Xbox because we punted on that. I think in a sort of a scope issue. We're like, well, let's just focus on Switch and PC. This is the kind of game that will do well on Switch. The audience is right for it. And if we had our druthers, we'd want to release on everything, of course. But because we're doing all the porting ourselves, or rather I'm doing all the porting myself, let's just focus on this for now. And that ended up being a good idea, but also a bad idea. And I'll talk about that later. All right. So at this point, I'm not working on the game as much now. I am now working on the sort of publishing side, right? I'm setting up the Steam page. I'm getting all our key assets together. I'm putting together a trailer. I'm trying to get the word out a little bit. I'm doing a little bit of like seeding information. I'm like not great at this. No one's great at this, but I'm doing a little bit on that. So we got a notice in PC Gamer, which is kind of fun, and that led us to one of our very first fans who saw that article and has been following us all the way through a launch. And then the best thing that happened to us this time was our pal Sarah Huskin, who you actually see in this image playing on the Switch with the NES controllers. She made our new key art. So this is a sketch that I did to sort of show what I wanted it to sort of look like. And I was like, well, I'm no illustrator. I can draw, right? But I'm no good illustrator. And so I gave that over to Sarah, and we did a services exchange. I did some work for her, and she did this for me. And I think I got the better end of that deal for certain. But I mean, look at it. It's the most gorgeous thing ever. So that's our box art, and that's gone a long way towards, our trailer thumbnail, our Steam capsule, all that stuff. Previously, the image we used was game art, and it was fine. And I kind of liked it, but it became very obvious that it wasn't going to stand out and wasn't going to show off the game as well as this more conceptual design was. So that worked out really well. So GDC. So this is when, I'm working on this publishing stuff, and the plan was always to self-publish this game. That was a big part of the learning process for me. But I'm like, you know what? We got our demo, right? And and that worked out well for platforms. And now the game is done. So why don't we, put it on a thumb drive and give it to publishers and see what we can do? So, it just happened to be that GDC was around this time. And so I brought my Switch dev kit so in my meetings, I can have people play it, which is kind of a fun magic moment. I also got myself a press pass to a separate event called Game Connection, which happens concurrently with GDC, which is where all the meetings happen, or a lot of them do. That's like a $2,000 ticket, but I found myself a press pads, and I did a little bit of press work there, but not a ton, for Nice Games Club, the podcast I do. But that was really, really beneficial because I got a ton of meetings doing that. It was very last minute for me. I was not planning to do a lot of business at this GDC, but then at the very last minute, I thought maybe I should, and it all kind of came together pretty nicely. So I had a bunch of meetings. And I was very clear in these meetings. I'm like, listen, we're not looking for funding. I don't want to work on this for 8 more months, But so this is the game, right? Like, there's going to be bug fixes. We're going to do some things. If if there's things you want us to do with it, if you are interested in signing this game, we're on board. But this is the scope of the game, right? If it's too short for you, then that's we'll go somewhere else. That's fine. And I was able to be confident about that because I knew that we were planning to self-publish this thing. So I didn't want to, even though I had fallen in love with the game, the game could be 3 times longer. It could have ton more content. We could have shipped that co-op mode. All of that stuff would have made it a better game and ultimately probably a more successful game. But the original idea of the game was to let's get this out quick. And I couldn't make that decision to change that plan for the team, especially because we'd already gone on, honestly, longer than we expected, which is normal for all games. But, we couldn't I couldn't decide to say, oh, let's turn this into a 5-year project. Let's turn this into or even a 3-year project. It was not something that I felt comfortable. I was worried about that it becoming that. And so I was pretty clear with publishers, and that probably scared off a few. But there was a mid-tier indie publisher super excited about it. And I feel kind of silly about it now because I got an email being like, yeah, I'll send you a contract next week. It's all good. Everything's fantastic. And then they just ghost me. So like, this is kind of, no one's a jerk, but and I don't mean, but I mean, no one's a jerk. And so you just have to be like, oh, there's a reason. There's a reason that I never heard back from that person. Maybe they couldn't get the people at their company to sign on to it. Maybe something else came up, but I don't know, whatever. But you kind of have to take a lot of that in stride. we had another publisher who was ready to sign, actually worked up a contract, sent over a marketing budget, and it just wasn't a good contract. And I might have gone with them because it would have published the game worldwide, but it wasn't. There weren't good terms, and I wasn't the company I wasn't excited about. But I mention it because if it were such that we just wanted the game published, if I didn't want to do the publishing side myself, and we still had our low ambitions for the success of the game, I would have happily signed with this, a publisher I wasn't excited about, because it would have gotten the game out there, and I would have had to do less work. But because I was more interested in that side of it, I decided, well, then I think I'll pass on this, and it's something that, like, the first deal you pass on in any of these kind of industries that are like hard to get any deals, it's like it's a weird feeling. Anyway, the third thing that really worked well for us is a company called Worker Bee, which picked up the game. They're publishing it in Japan. They're part of this cottage industry of companies that takes Western games and releases them in Japan because it's very hard to self-publish in Japan. So this was something that lined up perfectly with what I wanted to do. I still got to do all the publishing stuff, learn how that worked, and enjoy that process. And then also I got to access to a market that I would not be able to do myself. But the benefit of this also, and Dev talked about working with his publisher as well, and is that, especially for a small indie, they give you a lot of things you maybe don't expect. So what was great about Worker Bee is they did the localization for Japanese, and because I didn't want to do multiple builds, and I didn't want to give them the project files to have them work on it because the game wasn't totally finished yet, and I didn't want to bounce back and forth. That seemed complicated to me. So I said, well, I don't want to make different builds. So if you do the Japanese localization, can we write in the contract that you license that back to me so I can just put it in all versions of the game? And they were just, without a second thought, they're like, oh, of course, you could totally just have that. And that's work that has value that they just gave to me. And we're in a relationship, so there's it wasn't like a biggest surprise in the world, but it's nice to work with someone like that who kind of looks at logically the situation, like, yeah, that makes sense, let's work it out. They also did a bunch of QA for the game, just regular QA for the game, which of course is important to them because they're invested in the project, but it benefits me selling it in the United States and Great Britain and Canada and everywhere else. And they don't get any percentage of the sales, and they did the work on that. So I made very sure that I got the names of the people who worked on it so I could put that in the credits, because I felt I owed them that at least. But it's been a good relationship, and I'm just happy working on their schedule. So game's going to come out in another month or two, I think. I don't know. It passed lot check in Japan, it's the same thing, but it's just a separate process. So I'm just letting them release it whenever they want to release it. But it's been a really good relationship with them. Okay, so after all of this, it just feels like there's nothing left to do, right? It's just sort of polish at this point. And that's true. But I'm also really burnt out this time. Like, all that publishing stuff is exciting, and I was invested in doing it, but I'm not great at it. Like, it's not something I wanted. I didn't even really want to be good at it. I just wanted to learn it so I would have those skills. But especially the biz dev stuff of it. I think I'm personal. I think I'm good in a meeting, but I don't love being a producer. And so it was something that sort of took a lot out of me and was less rewarding in the moment as a lot of the work we were doing prior. So it was hard to pick back up, especially because now the rest of the work was all going to be like just bug stuff and like implementing a feature that we've been sitting on and hadn't done. So I ended up doing a lot of random things in this time. So, I did some achievement testing. So I built this little area to test destroying a bunch of bots. That was pretty valuable. I made a Mac build testing that out, which was necessary, but, anyone else on the team could have done that. I built Steam trading cards, which was kind of useless because our game does not qualify for that, because they have rules now and it's kind of arbitrary. And so I did a bunch of work for nothing. I built in Steam Workshop support, so you can draw, using a Photoshop template, you can draw your own socks that's for Sprocket to wear. This is in the game, it's in the code, but it's not enabled because there's two things I didn't finish of it. So it was never part of the core idea of the game, but I spent a lot of time on that, and then it's just sitting there waiting to be turned on. So it felt a little bit like I was kind of spinning my wheels here, and so progress felt kind of slow. And a part of the big reasons for this is that at this point in the project, it is kind of just me now. The team is still at this point giving a lot of feedback. They're testing out builds, and Ellen is helping me now starting to do marketing research. But at this point, all their work is done, right? And we didn't really plan on everything else that we had put up ended up being the stuff I was doing ended up having more than we expected. And that was part of, I was trying to sort of insulate the team from that, but ended up being that more and more piled on me in a way that I didn't expect. And so there was just nothing for the team to do at that point. And so it was kind of a tough time for me, because it certainly felt like a solo project again. The thing that was really nice though is that the channel was still going. If I worked on a thing, I posted about it. I got a lot of reinforcement from the team, encouragement, and so that was very beneficial. So I'm just thinking about a project like this where it is all on your own, and I've done those kinds of projects before, and but not all the way to this point. So I'm not looking forward to that on those projects, because I was sort of saved by the team spirit at least. And so at this point, also, I've run out of GIFs and screenshots. So this entire document, that the slides you've been seeing, is filled with stuff that I pulled from a folder of just archives I've been keeping, right? Everything's dated. And I'll talk a little bit about how important that is later. But at this point, I was so stressed out and just working on bugs and bugs and bugs and bugs and just polishing and finishing that it just stopped. I had nothing left in this folder, and I'd been keeping these things regularly, pretty effortlessly. And it was just interesting to look back at it and see that, like, oh, I stopped keeping track of the work I was doing, which is kind of interesting. And that's one of the reasons I'm able to have a history of this pretty well month by month, is because I saved a lot of records, and just in the form of screenshots. And so that kind of runs out at this point. But I kind of know what happened. It was pretty much just nose to grindstone trying to finish the thing. Another thing here is really trying to gear up for the release. So the thing we're doing here is we want to get some marketing help. And so I wanted to do the publishing. I wanted to do all that stuff myself. I wanted to learn how that backend stuff worked. I wanted to, do the porting. I wanted to do all that. I did not want to do PR. I did not want to send the build to streamers. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I could do that stuff, but I was not interested in learning it. And so I'm like, I've got some money. I will budget a PR budget for this. We've been working on this game long enough, and yes, we're not aiming for it to be a huge hit, but we would like to, make a little bit of money on it. All the team that had put a lot of their work and concepts into it, I wanted everyone to get a little bit for it. I didn't want it just to be a hobby project in the end after all this time, so we committed to putting a little money down. And it's a risk, but we wanted to press and streamers, social things like Discord, actually building a community, things that you need in this era. So we talked with a bunch of candidates, and we picked a person who ran a little small company, and just had a lot of really good ideas, and we had great conversations with him, and just understood what the game was and how to reach people. So we just drew up these really ambitious but within scope plans. We wanted to do a lot with the little we had, and I think that's where we felt really good with this marketing PR person, is that they felt similarly to us. Let's use what we have and try to get as much out of it as we can. Let's not do more than we think we can. Let's not have bigger ambitions than we can manage. Let's not waste our time. Let's just do what we can with this small marketing budget and use it effectively. So we had a bunch of fun ideas. He was really invested in Imgur, which is, apparently I've heard this since that it's a place, it's like a secret weapon for promoting your game. It's a way to get a lot of people involved. And I'm not a user of Imgur generally, so that was really interesting to hear and learn about how that works. So I prepped a lot of content for him to populate with that. We were going to, he was going to find a real ferret that we were going to film and sort of, squeeze into our announcement trailers, try to, again, get a little bit of sort of splashy attention based on our concept. And we picked a release date. So we did November 27th. So we wanted it out before holiday started crushing everything. But we wanted to get out of the way of Pokemon. And we ended up having to move a week because of the Stadia launch. Although looking back now, that did not make that big of a splash. So we figured it out. Plans were drawn up. I could finally relax, right? I could just, and here I'll take a drink just to illustrate, because I need to. And also this is a role play here. Okay. So I could finally relax. And LOL Stadia launch. Yes, that's right. I could finally relax and okay, this is great. I've done so much work. I can just focus now on passing lot check, on scheduling the release, on pressing that big button on Steam. And because I've got someone to handle it, and he'll get in touch with me if he needs any assets. I've given him a bunch of stuff so he can generate his own things. He has a build so he can do screenshots, and he can, he got access to our Twitter account. And so, whatever marketing, it was really going to mostly be PR, but whatever marketing that he was going to do was all in his hands. It was going to be great. And this is where, wah, wah, it was a very bad move because this PR person, I'll say sucked. And I'm not going to reveal, I'm not going to, trash this person individually, because I think it was a failure of ambition. It wasn't a con artist exactly, but like, I'm dancing around it. It went very badly. They did very little of what they promised to do. They would disappear for weeks. And all this time, I really had I was like, you know what? We trusted them to do it. We had really great conversations. I'm not going to freak out. I've still got these bugs to fix. I'm just going to, and I wasn't on the ball enough to catch these things. And Ellen was, and I never revealed how nervous she was, to her credit. But I think I could have done a little bit better of kind of keeping track of how badly it was going with this person. They were really committed to a portion of our budget was going to be going towards streamers, sponsored streamers, which is a world I wasn't familiar with, but I learned up a little bit on, and that made a lot of sense. But ultimately, didn't put together any offers for streaming until after launch, so it was useless. So that's the tricky part. And one of the things I try to keep in mind, and I think it's important because when you pay for a service and you don't get the results, it can be kind of sour grapes, right? But when you hire a PR, you do not pay for results, right? And I've known that as a freelancer, in film and video, it's always been important to me to value someone's time more than their result. The result is its own thing, but you don't pay someone to deliver you a successful marketing campaign or a successful video project. You pay for their time, and then you trust their expertise to deliver that. And so I knew that going in. I knew that when we set a 10 grand budget, I was fully ready for that money just to go down the drain. I did not expect someone to walk away with it. And that is kind of what happened. And you pay for someone's time and expertise, and we didn't get either. So this example's here. This is the throwing under the bus, because it is kind of funny. The week of launch, our marketing person was spending all their time on getting some Yeezys, which is not a thing I knew what that was. I'm like, oh, great, everybody has a hobby. But apparently it takes up a lot of your time. And so that was a little bit unnerving to hear. Also, promoting the project, calling the name by the game of our company and not the name of the game. Just little kind of, just over and over again, little problems that I let slide too often. And then ultimately, it just ended up really bad. Our PR press releases wouldn't go out. Then we wanted to hit a bunch of news beats, but then we kept waiting too long, and our ambitions kept scaling down and down and down just because we had gone 2 weeks and hadn't done anything. So that's me whining about it, but that's what happened. And so that was really kind of a depressing time. So 3 cheers for Ellen, because during this time, Ellen got control of our Twitter account and, worked with our marketer and said, and so what are we supposed to do? And he's like, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then Ellen did it. And Ellen posted on Reddit, Ellen edited our store copy. Ellen is the best. And this is not Ellen's wheelhouse. Ellen did, we brought Ellen to do level design. And then Ellen was just like, hey, I'll do more, because Ellen's the best. So that's one thing. Everyone on this team is awesome. But in that time of despair towards the end of the project, I was my bacon was saved, and my sanity as well, by Ellen. So everybody else, be nice to Ellen and work with her if you can, because she's great. Okay, so at long last, this game is out now, right? The game is released. So this was kind of a rough week. This is now just being a sad story, but I'm trying to make the best of it, right? We hadn't reached out to really much press. And again, not to say that our PR person, they didn't disappear with the money. They just weren't good at their job. And so, but basically we didn't really get any press attention. We didn't get any press requests were not being made, which was that was the hard part. We didn't talk to any streamers. We didn't send our keys to enough people. We're doing that thing you're not supposed to do, I later learned, which is you send an email saying, hey, do you want a key? That's a piece of advice. Just send your keys to people. Don't ask them if they want them. If they don't use them, fine. But you don't want to give them that extra step. And that's apparently what we were doing. And so in those last 10 days before launch, once I finally realized that things were not going well, I sprung into action as best I could, a little bit begrudgingly because I was not excited to do it. And I started using a service called Keymailer, which I recommend as well. Even the free tier is pretty good. You can send out keys to YouTubers, streamers, people on Mixer. It's a pretty good system. And then if you pay for it, it's a little too expensive, but then you get access to even better tools. So if you have a budget, that might be a place to spend it. So that was kind of good because I got some results doing that. And so that made me feel kind of good, but also kind of bad because I feel like we could have been doing this all along, but it was just last effing minute. So this was like the biggest mistake of the project. And I think this was a mistake that a lot of people make. But we made it on accident, if that makes sense. Like we were not looking to make this mistake. We were trying to avoid this very thing. And ultimately that's what happened. So I was very much worried that it was too late. And so I got this kind of fatalism. I was just like, well, I'm doing my best. I owe it to the project. I owe it to the team to try to like use this time because I had a couple of minutes spare because the game was built and ready and then passed lot check, and I had a couple of days. I wasn't working on bugs till the last minute. But also during the week of launch, I unexpectedly had to leave my co-working space, and so like there was a lot of drama there. I was dealing with an arm injury, like I had like a nerve issue, and I just wasn't making the best use of my time. So I missed last minute opportunities. Like I was not doing a good job. So I started this part by saying I swung in and tried to save the thing, but it was kind of a half effort. Like I was not in the right headspace to do that. But ultimately I saved a little of my sanity by not going crazy trying to do it perfectly. And so I developed a sort of a healthy fatalism. We did not set out to make a successful game, right? We had different goals for this. There was no demands on us to do this sort of thing. I put money into it. I put in a lot of time. Personally, I crunched a bit on it, but I got out what I wanted to get out, which is just learning so much about how these systems work, how publishing works, and ultimately achieving something. And the team did a really good job. Like, I think about this game, and I think about especially that period where I was sort of touching every part of it on my own. And I see parts of it that like are as good as they are because we were all in a room together for 15 minutes figuring it out, And so the game was good. And so I didn't really care if we sold a single copy. And so that ended up being a really good, I mean, not that it wasn't depressing what was happening, but I think I had an outlook that saved me from the worst of it. And it kind of sold okay, like all things considered. Launch, we had a couple hundred copies. And this is like a bomb. Let's not mince words about it. It did not sell great. It's like you don't want to like reveal exactly how many you sold. If it's not great, it's a little embarrassing. And I'm getting as close to it as I'm comfortable. But we did okay for what ended up being the effort that all things in vacuum. We did all right. We sold twice as many on Switch as on Steam, which is sort of interesting. And considering the circumstances, it's kind of hard to be that disappointed. We've done some bundles, we've done some sales. Game is still on sale for 3 or 4 more hours. And so it's got a few thousand installs now, but it's not made a ton of money, and it's not going to make that marketing budget back for quite a while. But again, it was an investment in learning, and I think that was a big part of it. So I feel really good about that. But it's now been a couple months since launch, so I can I'm kind of around to that kind of thinking. I'm sure people understand that kind of feel. Okay, so that's the whole story, right? And so now comes the actual postmortem part of the postmortem. Let's talk about what went right and what went wrong. And I've broken this up into categories because I can never not make this more complicated than it needs to be. So with the design, let's talk about what went right in this design. Design decisions were made quickly and we stuck to them. So this was a hard thing to do, but I think it was successful because it meant that later design, we could have ideas late in the process. And because our design had been so derived from every previous choice that we stuck to, it was really easy to know, hey, is this a good idea? Yes, it's a good idea. Is this an idea we should do? Well, as we moved on, we were really rigid about what the game was, and what it wasn't. So we could take ideas that were good and we could say, does this fit or doesn't this? And I think that's something that every game needs, every designer needs to do. And it's okay to be a little bit, it's okay to revamp, right? But the goal of this project from the start was to get it out. And I think 2 years is not the worst for a schedule for this. So I feel really good about that, and that the design was consistent and it was successful on that merit. The collaborative design process was so successful. Just those early meetings, just like, hey, what do I name this character? And then just, everybody kind of throwing in their ideas, bouncing back and forth, ideas forming from ideas, the sort of collective sum of it. I think about things in the game and I'm like, who had that idea? And I just have no idea. And that's kind of a cliche, but it's a really good feeling when you could be like, this was our idea. And there's a lot of that in the game. And as later on, especially when a lot of the labor was mine, I never forgot how much of it is the product of the people who designed it. And that's why it's as good as it is. And so that was a really successful, I think we did work very well together, especially in the design element. Tutorialization went really well. Our Metroidvania Lite, where it's sort of nothing blocks your path, everything's optional challenges, they were a pretty big success. They were unique. It wasn't it wasn't gonzo or crazy, a new idea for a video game. People didn't think of it as wacky, but then when they thought about it later, they're like, oh, that is kind of unique. And I think that was kind of the balance we were going for. People love the character, the setting, the lore. We got a negative review or a mixed review, and somebody said something about like, oh, it feels bad to say anything about this game because it's so charming and the story and the art is so great. And so that I feel is a win. If I can prevent a professional reviewer from crapping on the things they didn't like because of how well the game, how strong the spirit of the game is, I feel like that's a win. And a lot of that is in the design. And how it all comes together. Designing levels in blocks was really successful in terms of our efficient use of time. And the game was about the right length. I was always worried that the game was going to be too short. And I didn't want to sell the game for $3. I wanted to make sure that it would be a good use of people's time. We really leveraged replayability, speedrunning categories, optional challenges, so that you could play it again and again and again. But even then, I wanted that first playthrough to be substantial so that people would have a reason to come back to it and not feel that it was a frivolous thing. And we ended up doing a pretty good job of it. It took us a while, but the game was about the right length. What went wrong? There's too much was left on the table. So the game is the right length, but it could be 5 times longer. Like it really could. This is something that I didn't want to overscope, and we made the right choice. But I think I do want to make a super widget satchel. I really want more of this stuff. And what it really needed actually is the kind of thing that you have in a game like Mario Sunshine or Odyssey, where you flood is taken from you or Cappy is removed, and you just have to rely on the basic mechanics. And so this game needed something similar where Sprocket would crawl through a hole and the satchel would get left behind. And then you're in a new area like challenge rooms. I think it's that way we could have expressed a lot more of our mechanical ideas without being tied to the core mechanic of the game. I think we didn't do that because it was out of scope, but it would have been nice if we had the time for that. I do wish we had maybe reoriented some of our project. It would be a different game, but it might be sort of interesting. The challenge, if you want it, maybe wasn't as successful. So the game is super easy, but when players play it, they are enticed by the challenges, right? I was thinking like, oh, if you're just going to goof off, then all the challenges are whatever. But there's actually nobody who is a total hardcore player in all situations or a total goof off player who doesn't want any of the challenge. Everybody lives in the middle. And I think the game didn't quite do enough to find things that felt really satisfying for the people in the middle. That's probably not a unique problem with this game, but I didn't realize that at first. So it's just looking back on it, I'm like, oh, you know what? That maybe we didn't spend enough time trying to make that work. It was really focused on, oh, you could play it this way or that way. And we knew you could play it in the middle or you could switch as you go, but we didn't quite think about how that would feel for the player. And so that's the audience I would think, if I had this to do again, I would consider that as the main audience rather than trying to work for multiple audiences. That also needed to be done, but so it goes. Designing levels and blocks, again, very successful in terms of our efficiency. We're also able to have a lot of variety without being tied to other things. That was really useful. But it was also difficult for each designer to take that block and place it in the whole level. So it ended up being kind of tricky to say like, oh, this is perfect over here, but you have to start with 0 widgets, or this only works if you have these 2 doohickeys. Like, okay, that's fine, but then where do we put it in the level? And so it ended up having a lot of more iteration than we thought. We threw out a ton of good ideas because we just couldn't get past that first step because we just immediately like, oh, that's not going to fit anywhere. And especially as in level 4 and 5, when things got a little bit more rigid in the level stage before we got to the blocks, we sort of limited our creativity a little bit in that way. I don't know how we could have done that any better, but I think that's part of what happened there. Again, having these bonus areas would have probably alleviated some of that pressure. But it also ended up meaning that the stitching together of levels, which was my big job in level design, I ended up doing way more of that work than I really thought I was going to. Just finding ways for things to match, or for the player to where like, oh, I just have to change this one thing with that level, and oh, I need to talk to the person who did it so that they understand that what I'm thinking about, and maybe I'm missing something of what they did. I don't want to wreck it. And there was just a ton of that, all the way up to the very end, just things being tweaked so that everything fit together way more than I expected. Okay, development. So this was a learning project for me, and I think I did a really good job biting off exactly how much I could chew. I hopefully the other team members feel very similar. I know Ellen's talked about how she enjoyed working in Unity, doing the level design, and so I think that worked out really well. I did a lot of things I'd never done before. I started on things I didn't know how to finish, and I think that paid off pretty well. So I felt that was great. I definitely did a good job there. Also, I over-engineered a lot of systems because I was learning how a lot of it worked. And that could feel like a waste of time, but it ended up creating a lot of this modular reusable code, which now I have libraries for, which is really fantastic. I've already used it on other projects, which has been really, really helpful. And also, even on Widget Satchel itself, having clean code, readable code, things that I could then repurpose, reuse, or it really prevented me from building the same thing twice, because I would kind of build it the first time a little bit bigger than it needed to be, and then suddenly I could sort of like work with it elsewhere. So that worked out really, really well. So what didn't work is we had good bug tracking, right? We it wasn't like a Jira system, but we kept track of all the things that went wrong. Every time we went through a playthrough, we assigned them to people, we tracked them, we made sure that they were being finished, but we are not super great at testing. And I don't think that there was any particular reason why this happened. I think this is just hard. And so sometimes the same bugs would just come back over and over and over again. We would, like I would work on a thing. I'd be like, okay, it works now. And I would throw it in the done pile. And then 2 months later, it would all happen again. And I would forget entirely what I had done to fix it. And so it was very tricky. I think we just did not do a good job of the sort of follow through on testing bug fixes. We did some wheel reinvented happening when developers left the project. So towards the end, it ended up being sort of simpler for me to sort of just rewrite a thing than to demand a lot of Steven's time, for example, to say, hey, can you explain to me how you built this thing? And so sometimes that was useful. Other times I did a pretty good job of bugging Steven enough, but not too much. And then he was able to simply describe the easy way he built it. And then I totally got it finally. But I did a little bit more wheel reinventing than I probably should have. Some systems were just too complicated. And then we replaced them with simpler versions. And this was something that, like, as I learned how these things work, and learned that there was like a component available in Unity already, it ended up just I sort of swallowed my pride a lot, and that was actually successful. I just had to do it too often, which was kind of frustrating. The last thing is punting on the PlayStation, Xbox versions actually has not worked, not paid off. I think it maybe was the right decision in terms of like not spending more time, especially when you're going through certification and all that stuff. But now that the game is out and I want to work on those ports, I kind of wish I was in the moment when I was working on the Switch port. There's certainly business reasons to launch all at once. And I think that, we knew we were giving up that, right? We were consciously saying, listen, it's worth our time to not do it. But the reason I'm putting it here is because I feel like I'm going to be wasting a little more time than I want now, because I'm not working on I'm going to just work on the same things I worked on a year ago when I was porting it to Switch. So that is something I didn't really think about till doing this postmortem, but like, oh, maybe I should have, not been so quick to turn away from those. We'll see. Production. So what went right? Regular meetings was very good. We had our for the design early on was really useful, and also doing our production sprints was good as well. Our modest expectations were good. It meant nobody except me crunched on the project. I don't think so. Lane and Steven in chat can correct. But I think that worked out okay. Nobody felt like their careers were on the line with this thing, and so I think that was good. We also continually adapted our schedule. So every time we fell behind, we didn't like kill ourselves about it. We're like, all right, we didn't calculate this right. Let's see what it's going to take. And we did a pretty good job of keeping on the ball of like, oh, we're going to take 3 weeks to finish this, and we've only got a third of the way through. All right, well, let's take 6 more weeks. Like, we were kind on ourselves as best we could, while still being as firm as we were able to sort of motivate us to get things done. I think we did a pretty good job on that. And when we added a feature, when we did actually increase the scope, we understood what that meant, and we did a pretty good job of knowing when it was worth it and when it wasn't. So what went wrong in production? Some of the systems, feats, which are our achievements on Switch, the stat system for keeping track of everything, and the mischief scoring. They were just implemented way too late, and they were actually designed well past the design stage. So that period where I was talking about how the game was finished, a lot of these systems came after. And so that was pretty frustrating, because I really did not benefit from the team's collective wisdom. I tended to rely on that early on when I was making big decisions. It really helped me a lot to ask everybody what they thought, and then I would either I'd get sort of, yes, that makes sense, and then that was kind of reassuring, or I would get a what about, and then immediately it would become clear what the right choice was, because we had all put this together. And so that was really useful early on. These later systems, I felt a little bit more on my own, because they were just past the point where we were working on the design parts of it. So I think those suffered a little bit for that. And then our modest expectations were good, but they became kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. At some points in the production, it was hard to get everybody to care because there really wasn't anything on the line. And that's probably not a bad thing. But it was kind of tricky at times. And the last thing is, like, I ended up being the producer on this thing as well as sort of the lead, especially towards the end. And this just wasn't fun for me. Like, when I'm working on something all by myself, that's great. But it's, things are going to be better when you have more people. But, I would really have preferred to have an actual producer on the thing to help out. One, because they'd be better at it. But also then I could maybe focus more on what I need to do. I would take on less myself that I didn't need to, for example. And I don't think I'm sure I was okay at managing the project, but I don't think it was fun for everybody else either. So, all right. The release, I went over a bit of this, but like, we made a game that's fun to watch. So streamers who did stream it, and we got a couple of them, liked the game, and the people who were watching it were pretty well engaged. There's not a big number, but like, it was good, which gives me a lot of confidence that, like, if we had done a little bit better in the marketing side, then the game itself was not the barrier to the success. And so that'll never be proven in a court of law, but I do feel it makes me feel good about the game. And we played a bad hand as well as we could, but of course, that's just ignoring that, like, I'd say the dealing of the cards weren't entirely out of our control. I made some bad decisions on that I need to be own up to. But in the end, when we had the situation where it was just not going to be a successful launch, and I knew it, I think with Ellen's help, I think we did a pretty good job with what we could manage. And of course, what went wrong, our marketing person just ghosted us, and it was just it's not the only thing that prevented it, but like, it just it might not have added much to the success. Like, say everything went exactly like we planned, maybe the game wouldn't have sold a single more copy. I can't even assume that it would have, right? I have to assume that was not the reason why it wasn't a huge success. But it made that last month an absolute nightmare. I am still like trying to remember all of it because I kind of blocked out a bit of it. It was a really, really tough week. But it was not, there were moments where people who did play it, were people who tweeted about it and people who streamed it. Like, nothing can take that away, but it was kind of it was a peek through the clouds rather than what it should have been. So that was tough. All right. So now we're coming to the end finally. How did I do? Okay. I've used up a lot of your time, but things you already know, limit your scope. Be ruthless but not arbitrary. One of the things I said all the time was, if that's a great idea, but let's save it for Super Widget Satchel. And I think that became something that we all understood. And I think we did a pretty good job of keeping our scope down. But sometimes you do got to add that thing. And I think we were okay at figuring out when that was going to be doing. You got to learn by doing. If you stick to what you're never going to make anything new. So there's like a balance between being like logical, being cautious, and being ambitious, right? And I think that's something that everyone's going to find their own balance on that. Share what you learn. Like, nobody got rich keeping secrets. I mean, maybe they did, but I don't care. Like, don't keep secrets. Like, if you learn something and it comes in handy, if it helped your game, there's no such thing as a competitive advantage. It's just an advantage. So please share it. Hopefully, your learnings can help other people. We are all in this together, at the indie level, especially. But even if it's your opus, this is another piece. It's not your final work, so finish it. This is something everybody knows. Something I used to tell filmmakers all the time, which is like, don't put all your ideas into this one thing. You'll have another thing, and in order to have the other thing, you gotta get the damn thing done. Things you might not know that I think are good takeaways is keep a media folder. So like I said, in this presentation, I was able to have all those images streaming through and be able to know when I made them because I was just keeping track of them at the time. You're doing this also, but not everybody is saving these things. Just have a folder in your project that's just called media or whatever you want to call it, and just dump them in there. Like, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. As long as you have timestamps on your files. You can date them in the names if you want to, but you don't always have to. If you have a Slack channel for your project, dig through it every now and again to grab screenshots that other people have made, throw them in there as well. This is good for a collective knowledge when you want to do one of these postmortems of your own, but also it's going to come in handy for things like dev diaries and for media and marketing and PR. I mean, one of the things that we were going to be doing on Imgur that we never got around to because you know why, is actually talking about the production of the game and about like how things were put together. And I had a ton of material for that effort because I had been keeping track of all this stuff and just dumping them in a folder. So I recommend doing that. It really does come in handy. Set deadlines, even if they're bad. So we all know we should set deadlines, but like, don't be afraid to set one that's kind of like lazily arrived at, because once you blow it, then whatever, just set a new one, right? You do need to just put a box around yourself and go ahead and knock it over, make it bigger, cut a hole in it, do whatever you want. But like, you need to have some framework. If you just are like, oh, I'll get around to it, or like we have this level we're going to work on and it'll be done when it's done. That's not going to work. And of course, if you don't know how long it's going to take, that is an easy way for you to say, oh, well, then I guess I won't decide because I don't want to come with a bad deadline. But no, bad deadlines are good too. So do those. And the last thing I think that's really helped us, and this is maybe more of a matter of opinion, but meet and work with your team in person. And of course, in these times, that's not possible. But keep an open comm line. So have a chat open. And not just text, although, I mean, that can work for some people. But one of the advantages we had when we were all working together, even when we were nose down and nobody was even working on the same thing, we're in the same room, you could at any point just be like, hey, can you take a look at this? Or you could walk over and say, hey, what are you working on? Or, hey, who wants a snack? Like, it's just like games is hard. So do it together. And I think that, even if you're working on a team, I think it's important to schedule that time to work together. And if it's a job you have, a place you go, then that's not a problem. But if it's an independent project, try to give it some of that structure. I think have a regular schedule. Nobody likes homework, so if you just meet and then all agree to do something by the next meeting, that's fine. That can work. But nobody likes homework, so it can be helpful to set times you're going to all work together, and it doesn't have to be super rigid, but it can be very beneficial. And then also, then you have a better idea of like how much is going to get done. If you say like, let's work for 4 hours this weekend, and then we're going to get together and work for 6 hours on Wednesday night, we're really going to push it. Like then you've got 10 hours of work. So then you can decide, okay, the four of us are going to be working for 10 hours. How much work can we get done? It's much easier to track and be more realistic about what your expectations are going to be for progress on your project if you actually just schedule time. And that's it's easier to do for units but yourself. It's harder to do with the team. And there's going to be exceptions. I mean, obviously, if that's the only work you do, your game's going to move pretty slowly if you're only meeting once a week or something like that. But it was when we did meet together, even when we weren't working a ton of hours, we got a lot more done than when we had much more time to ourselves. And so your mileage may vary on that, but I think that's a takeaway that I came across with this one. All right, that's the whole damn thing, guys. Thanks for sticking through the whole thing. If anybody has questions, I will be watching the chat. I'm 6 seconds behind, of course, and I'm out of breath. And hopefully I didn't bore you too much. But please, have at it.
This is where I come in. Live round of applause. Hi.
Do you want to pop in and say hi?
Yeah, I want to ask the first question.
Okay.
So people are wondering what you're drinking and if it's devil juice.
It is devil juice. That's right. Steven can describe what devil juice is.
Oh, I was going to make you do it.
Nope, Steven is going to describe it.
Oh, boy. Okay, and then they were also very concerned about your arm.
Oh, yeah. I just have like a nerve issue on my arm. It makes it hard to lift heavy boulders and stuff as you do.
Oh, yeah. We keep them around the house.
I'm fine. It's just it makes life a little bit annoying. It's been going on for a couple months, but do not worry about me.
Okay. My other question is, you want to talk about the launch party at all?
Launch party. Oh yeah. Stephen and Ellen and the folks at Glitch put together a launch party for 2 weeks after launch, probably when I was at my most depressed. And so they handled it for me, which was real nice. It was a fun party. Folks can talk about that.
Okay. And Steven says it's part orange soda, part Diet Coke.
Mm-hmm. Equal parts. That's important because then it's easy to make.
It's disgusting.
Uh-huh.
But the good part about the launch party is because it is partially for you. They had orange soda and Diet Coke.
They had devil juice for me there. That was very, very kind. It was a moment of kindness that like it got to me. I was like, oh yeah, you guys know the dumb thing I drink, and you supplied it to me, and nobody else would of course want it. It was very sweet.
No, who would want that?
But yeah, Rachel Notes, she helped out with that too. It was really, really cool.
Yeah. And they had lots of IRL games there,
Yeah.
with lots of socks, because obviously that's what you collected. So it was super fun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anything else you catch along the way?
That's what I caught along the way, but now they're just talking about devil juice.
It's the only interesting thing that I've said tonight.
That's so not true.
I want to ask a question. With all that junk, was that hard on all the? I'm gonna go with. You can tell I'm not a programmer. RAM and active memory and
you mean did it grind my Switch dev kit to a halt all the time because Ellen put too many exploding barrels in her block? Yes, that's what happened, and I did a lot of optimization, and there was almost as many explosions as Ellen wanted, which is a tall order still. I think we did okay. And in fact, the latest Switch patch, which is now available and still on sale for another hour or two, has a huge performance increase. So that was fun. It was actually, it was a struggle to learn. But now that it runs on Switch, which is basically a next-gen toaster, the PS4 Pro version is going to fly.
Okay. They say there can never be enough exploding barrels.
Yeah. Uh-oh, Lane's got a spicy question.
Okay. Oh.
I don't know, Lane did...
Here, I'm going to read it.
Okay.
Did you
Everyone else can read it.
Regret sticking to the no death pillar? Wait, I did a terrible job with that. Did you ever regret sticking to the no death design pillar?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to answer that before you can finish reading it.
Okay, great, because I can't finish reading it. It keeps moving.
Yes, Lane, you can have your thoughts on this too, because I think this was something that we had from the jam that I don't think I entertained a lot of discussion about changing it, but I did realize during playtesting that one of the things that I didn't expect was that when you die in a game, it's a quick reset, right? And so there were two consequences. One is that we'd have people playing for 20, 30 minutes, and we'd be like, wow, people are really digging this game. The truth is that when you don't die, there's no natural time to get up and leave. And so we ended up being like, oh, well, at least it's not boring people to death. But we ended up, our playtests were a little bit misleading because people couldn't die. And so they just kept playing, and not necessarily because like the game didn't give them a lot of opportunities to leave. So we didn't get a lot of win by them refusing to leave, if that makes sense. And so that kind of skewed some of our early positive results. I think we accounted for that later. The second problem was that we had to design a lot of things so that when you didn't die, what happened to you? If you had to reset an area over and over again, that was really tricky. And I ended up being pretty happy with that because one of the things I wanted to do, and Steven and I talked about a lot, is when you fall down a pit, it needs to give you some reward, right? So widgets are hard to find, and the whole thing is a bit of a maze, and it helps with the Faraday sort of running aroundness, that when you fall down a pit, there's like a prize waiting for you. So if you are great at this game from jump, like you're a Mario player going way back, and you just breeze through level one. Level one was a great example of this. People just breeze through level one and they'd miss a bunch of stuff because they didn't fall down the things. Now, the problem is what happens when you fall down 10, 20, 30 times. And, I think we just took our lumps on that one. But as we got further along in production, as we did more and more playtests, the amount of times people would say or get frustrated by doing the same loop over and over again really, really reduced. And I tried to ask more and more when they were finished, like, was it frustrating when you couldn't make that jump 30 or 40 times? And less as we went on, we got yes to that. So I don't regret it, but Lane might be hinting that there was a different game in there that might have made a better use of a quicker reset than we ended up having.
Okay, ready for your next question?
Sure.
It comes from Zedokofer.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know who that is.
I do?
Uh-huh.
No, I don't. Question. You said you'd like to have a project manager to help oversee things, but what would be the most important thing you would want them to do?
Keeping a checklist, right? Like one of the reasons why Ellen is a great producer, and she wasn't a producer on this project, and I resisted the urge to make demand that of her. But one of the things she did, and Stephen could talk about how that she did a great job on the Jam project they worked on, is just keeping track of stuff. I think anyone who's sort of self-motivated, who's done their own project and keeps their own checklist, that's great. But as soon as you bring a single other person into it, it becomes tricky. And not impossible, but it becomes sort of onerous. And if someone's just in charge of being like, oh, this is what, and they can have kind of a big picture view, right? I think that's something that I ended up having to have, and I didn't want it. Like I really wanted to drill down and work on that UI component, right? And then, but I had to task switch way more than I needed to. So if it was somebody's job to, and it doesn't mean that that person can't also be a developer. They can't also be the artist. They can't also be the musician or something. Like I think, you got to wear many hats. But it would have been nice to have someone whose main job it was to keep track of schedules, check out what the conventions were coming up, maybe even like deal with some of the emails with platform holders or publishers, or someone whose job that was. So it didn't feel like I was taking time away, because I came to resent it sometime. And I think people will probably sympathize with that feeling.
Okay, next question is for me.
Oh yeah.
Dale, would you pronounce that name one more time, please? No.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. We did okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, or are we ready to hand it back to Martin, who has been silent this entire time, even with his microphone on? Good for him.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Are we sure he didn't leave? I have another question.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that you had engineered a lot of different tools.
Mm-hmm.
I know that one of those tools is available now. You want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. I was going to make build a drop-in menu system out of the stuff from Widget Satchel for the GDC Relief Jam that happened last weekend. I didn't. I actually built a whole brand new one. So I'll put a link to that in the chat. Because I just little projects are fun, especially when you do big projects all this time. I just realized I have the stream muted, so I actually don't know when to stop talking. But let's just say I'll stop talking now, and Martin can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Oh, it still says intermission. I don't know how to make that. You should be able to hear me now. Or anyway, everyone else can still hear me. I guess I'm going to make this go back to here, I guess. Yeah, okay, cool. So thanks everyone for coming. I think we're basically wrapping up at this point. I kind of want to suggest... Oh, shoot. Is this working? Does anyone know? Can you see and hear me? Anyone? Oh, yeah, I can hear myself, so it's got to be totally... Yeah, okay, yep. Sweet. Okay, so I was thinking, yeah, we should have a virtual bar, right? And my suggestion is that we should... You know what, though? It's still not... I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties because... No, it is muted. I don't know. Okay, it seems to be working, but the Twitch manager is not updating, but the other Twitch is up. Okay, whatever. It's working more or less. So I was thinking we could all go hang out in Discord, but the problem is that I can't for like another hour. But I think we should do it. I'm going to post, I think, a link to the IGDA Discord, but you can also go into the MSP Gamedev Slack and... yeah, it's not our Discord. It's actually the parent org's Discord. But I think that link will take you right to the Twin Cities channel, I think. So let me know if that's true or not true. And also, if it doesn't work, I will also be in Slack, monitoring Slack. So, oh, hey, Lane's up in there. Sweet. So we got some people in the Discord. We can turn on the audio chat, and we can all chat up in there. I will not be there. Well, I'll be there for a little bit, but then I'm going to have to take off, and then I can come back at like 10. So, anyway, thanks everyone for coming, and I think we're done with the stream, so have a good night.